I want to welcome you to the Retro Rogues Live. Please pay attention to our warning graphic. It states that the Retro Rogues Live show is intended for an adult audience and not intended for children under the age of 13. Parental discretion is advised. I want to welcome you to the show. I am Coruscant the Emperor, ruler of the known galaxy. Once again, a season of The Mandalorian has ended, and we will have derision. I want to welcome back the co-host, Eric Alexander. Please tell the folks hopefully watching or listening at home how you turned to the dark side.
Oh, it's good to see you, Emperor, your lordship. It's great to have you on the show. And yes, I am Eric Alexander, also known as Base God 14. That's Base God 14, not Bass God 14. That's Bass God, like a bass guitar. And I am the chief financial officer of a small production company in Arizona called Bad Bob Productions. And currently, we're actually in the middle of a Indiegogo campaign. And I did want to go ahead and let folks know where that campaign is at right now. It's actually doing very well, but we have not reached our goal yet. And we definitely need your support. So right now, it is at 59% of our goal. It is at $11,922. Who knows? Maybe tonight we'll get over 12,000, which would be nice, which I think will put us right at around 60%. We've got 182 backers with 38 days left. So it's looking good. But of course, we do want to reach that goal as soon as possible because that gives us some breathing room if we get that $20,000 goal. I want to emphasize some of the rewards. For basically $11, you can get a copy of the film. That's a digital download of the film for $11. You can also get a special pandemic IMDb credit for $20. And what's really nice about this is basically the idea of this is, let's say you have a family member who wants to get into IMDb, which can be quite difficult if you don't have the proper credentials. And let's say they're trying to get into acting or producing or just trying to get into the film industry in general. They really want an IMDb credit. Well, you can gift them an IMDb credit, before Christmas. And it's really something that's really nice for somebody, especially, again, if they are trying to get into the industry. And then some of the other credits down the way, you can get a staycation T-shirt for $30. You can get also the Routine prequel, which actually the Emperor's alter ego, Dave Beatty, actually worked on. He actually worked on Routine, which is considered the prequel to Staycation. That's for $51. You get a digital download of Routine, which is a micro short. Or if you want an actual DVD, a DVD of Staycation, the film, you can get that for $57. So again, we're pretty close to 60% right now. Hoping to, we're definitely over that hump, of 50%. So just want to encourage people to go ahead and contribute to that. And I'm going to go ahead and put a link for everybody. And I also want to thank Russ Emanuel, the director, again, for being on the show last week and talking about the Staycation Indiegogo campaign.
Do what must be done and support the Staycation campaign.
Appreciate that, Emperor.
You're welcome.
All right, enough about that. All right, okay. All right, I decided to do something silly. Of course, my hair is all messed up. I'll put my hat on here in a moment. Thought it would just be fun to do something kind of crazy and silly. We're obviously going to be talking about The Mandalorian tonight as our main show topic. And I've obviously been thinking, wow, look at that. That's crazy. How do I get that under control? All right. Anyhow.
I have to say, because we talked about it off the air, that at first when I saw this, because Dave didn't tell me he was going to do this, so I was actually as surprised as anybody else. I thought you were going to be a Skywalker. I thought you were Dave Skywalker.
No, I'm not going to be a Skywalker.
You're not going to impersonate a Skywalker?
No.
Because that seems to be the thing, isn't it? To impersonate Skywalkers? Isn't that a Disney Wars thing?
We don't have the budget for me to impersonate a Skywalker. You need a CGI budget to impersonate a Skywalker.
Oh, well, if you're Rey, you can just call yourself a Skywalker, even if you're a Palpatine. Apparently,
that's a different thing.
Oh.
She should never have denied her heritage. All right.
Denied her heritage. By the way, just remember the Emperor won, because that's exactly what he wanted. He wanted his granddaughter to go forth, and he wanted to die, and that's exactly what happened.
That's very true.
Hey, Jane's
right.
in the house.
Oh.
Says, hey guys.
Hi, Mom. Well, anyhow, that's it for my silliness. I was gonna try and keep it going a little bit longer, but I was telling Eric.
I think it would have been fun if you had kept it the entire Mandalorian review.
Oh, okay.
You could have kept like referring to like when you were talking about like your own opinions, because obviously I know there's a big thing you want to talk about. I mean, well, it's the big thing about the episode, and the fact that you made a certain prediction many moons ago. Gosh, over a year ago, right? Because we were reviewing last year, right? So it's over a year ago you made this prediction. But you know, everything has gone as you have foreseen. But you could have kept referring to, like, you know, Dave, you know, the Emperor talking about Dave and Dave's predictions and things like that, and you know, like you were his minion or something like that, and it was all the Emperor who was telling you everything that happened and went on, and that's how you knew, you know, because you were just the Emperor's pawn, you know. That would have been fun. See, we should have talked about this beforehand. I could have given you some ideas.
There you go. Oh well, I could have.
I want to thank my donor.
You know, because you know Grogu is basically part of the donor that helped bring me back, right?
That's
Wasn't it his blood?
Actually, that's an interesting thing to talk about, speculation, when we finish our review, because that is something to talk about. You know, I'm a lore guy, so, and I'll tell you, you know, I got some continuity issues with the Mandalorian Chapter 16, The Rescue. I'm telling you, you know, I'm a lore guy, so.
Well, that's why I said, and we shall have derision. All right, so here on this episode of the RetroX Live, we're going to start off with our main topic for this evening. It's going to be The Mandalorian Chapter 16, the episode titled The Rescue. All right, now the summary here on IMDb, which basically tells you essentially almost nothing. It says The Mandalorian and his allies attempt a daring rescue. So that's what's going on in this episode. Again, hardly nothing. All right, so as always, we're going to start off by talking about our general impressions of this particular episode. And then after we talk about that, we're going to get into a spoiler-filled conversation and break down some of the various things that happened, and then kind of get knee-deep into our actual thoughts. And there's a lot to talk about in this particular episode. Let me go ahead and start changing things over here. So there is a lot to talk about in this particular episode. So Eric, why don't you start us off by talking about your initial impressions of this episode of The Mandalorian titled The Rescue?
Well, I feel somewhat of like a broken record at times, because this episode, you know, I have a lot of mixed emotions about it. And it even goes beyond the episode. You know, I actually, Dave and I recorded an episode of our spinoff show, which is the Retro Rogues Mysteries show, which is a pre-recorded show. We actually recorded that yesterday. And I was mentioning to him that I hadn't even seen this episode yet, but I already had been spoiled. I was spoiled the night it came out, you know, because I'm very active on Twitter. I'm usually up very late. I'm a night owl, and I was spoiled. And the thing is, the reason I got spoiled, like the reason that I don't just watch The Mandalorian when it first comes out, is because I wait for my daughter to be here. She goes back and forth between, you know, her mom and I wait for my daughter to be here so we can watch it together. We actually watch it with my brother typically. So the three of us watch it together. Sometimes my other kids will come and watch it. I have one daughter in particular that I thought was a big fan of The Mandalorian, and she would always make a point to watch it with my brother. My brother's a huge Star Wars fan. Like me, we get into weird, stupid debates, actually. He starts to huff and get angry. He's one of those types of people. I'm one of those types of people sometimes. We take our opinions a little too seriously at times, but we watch it together. And this particular weekend, even though my daughter was here, she had no interest in watching it. And, you know, I was telling her, this is the last episode. Don't you want to watch it? And it's like, no, I'd rather, you know, go on the computer and play Roblox. And it kind of makes me wonder. It's like, obviously everybody has been talking about there's a huge reveal in this episode. This is, I think, the best reviewed episode of The Mandalorian IMDb. I think it's up to a 9.9. Like, it's almost at a 10. So it's almost got a perfect rating on IMDb, as I understand it. And, obviously, I think that's because of the fanboys. I think the fanboys are really into this, particularly the ones that are around my age are basically, that they seem to be the ones that are really clamoring for this. But I'm sitting there, I can't help but sit there and scratch my head a little bit that, my daughter didn't really care, and she hasn't even seen it yet. And it kind of makes me wonder about the future of Star Wars and whether the future of Star Wars really is all that bright or even all that clear at this point. I just don't know. I just don't know what to think about it. I'm sure there's lots of other kids that really enjoyed it. But I also have to say, I think what kids like the most about The Mandalorian, they may have got rid of that.
Well, that's an interesting perspective. And I am genuinely curious to revisit that once we actually get into the spoilers. My initial impression, Eric already knows this. I really, really enjoyed this episode. It had a lot of stuff in it that I just thoroughly loved. I was kind of surprised. I was actually moved basically to tears at one point. I'm not gonna, sugarcoat it and said I wasn't. I was. I think I've seen it at least 5 or 6 times so far. There was just a lot about this episode that, in all honesty, I genuinely loved. It was a surprise that it did turn out that my prediction that I had way, way, way back when did unfold as I had foreseen. So that was kind of a pleasant, fun thing, no, I did not tap into the dark side, in order to do that. But I was surprised that they went there, because it does kind of open, a bit of a Pandora's box, if you will, about how they're going to handle certain things moving forward. It does potentially create some problems. But I'm sure we'll get into that further when we get into the spoiler discussion. But generally, I love this episode because it had so much stuff in it that I thoroughly liked. I generally just enjoyed the episode. I don't have a lot of complaints with it. But I will say, Eric, that your comment of watching it, sometimes you said it's like you sometimes talk about it's like a Saturday morning cartoon. In terms of like how it's structured and how it plays out.
Oh yeah.
This one to me reminded me of an episode of Buck Rogers, the Gil Gerard, Aaron Gray Buck Rogers, and I'll explain exactly why when we get further into the spoiler discussion. But it really, really reminded me of an episode of Buck Rogers, to the point that I almost wonder if, sometimes they'll give people temp cues when they're working on a film, like they'll have cut the film and they'll have like temp music in it. I'm pretty sure that wasn't the case with this, but there was a scene and the musical cues were so in line with the old Buck Rogers TV show that it almost felt like that's kind of what I was watching to an extent.
Wow.
Now, for me,
I didn't pick up on that at all, and I'm a huge Buck Rogers fan. That's interesting. I didn't pick up on that at all.
For me, being a huge Buck Rogers fan, it just reinforces the fact that I loved it. I liked all that, But this is the episode where, Eric, where I could kind of see what you're talking about in terms of sometimes, with the way they portray the stormtroopers, that it does take a little bit of the air out of the room when you're talking about like the stakes, right? Because I'm surprised that we had so many characters make it all the way through this particular season, especially when you consider that they killed Quill and the IG unit in the last season. I was really thinking by the time that we get to the end of this episode, a couple of people are not going to make it. And I was surprised that when we get to the end of this episode, everybody made it. There's been a C shift, like a seat shift, or what do you want to call that, in terms of what may be coming in the future. But I was surprised that, that none of the main heroes, none of them were that worse for wear, at the end of this particular episode. So
Yeah, and obviously that's a spoiler, and so we're into spoilers. But that's one of for me, I almost find that unforgivable. I've said that that's been one of my main criticisms this entire season, is the stakes have never felt real to me. I've never felt like our heroes are in any real danger. I've never felt like, even when they introduce a new character or side character, like they're in any real danger. And it's odd to me, because they did make those very bold choices in season 1. Quill was a very popular character, and I think IG-11 became a very popular character. IG-11 is probably still my favorite character, other than Baby Yoda himself. IG-11, I really liked IG-11. I was even thinking about getting the toy. I've decided to wait for the retro line, which I think is not coming out until June. Can you believe that? Why isn't the retro line coming out until June? But anyway, I think I'm going to wait for that, because I would like to have an IG-11 figure, an IG-11 monument, if you will. But they didn't do that. And that's really disappointing to me, because it just feels like as I've said it 100 times, it feels like a Saturday morning cartoon.
Well, and that was one of the things I noticed the most. And I'll be honest with you, the first watching of it, I don't think I was that really kind of in tune with that. It kind of came on the repeat viewings that I started kind of noticing it, because there's some points at which wherein the Mandalorian is battling Moff Gideon, that I was kind of surprised that he kind of came out as well as he did. Because I was thinking,
let's not get too far ahead of ourselves, because let's start at the beginning. We're obviously into spoilers and into the deep dive. So let's start at the beginning of the episode, right? So we get to see one of those classic Imperial shuttles, right? And it's got the cloner aboard, the cloning scientist with 2 pilots, and Slave One is right on its heels, basically trying to overtake it. Clearly what they want to do is take the Imperial shuttle, very much like Return of the Jedi, right? It's very much a Return of the Jedi callback. It's the same class of shuttle as we saw in the Return of the Jedi. Basically, their plan is to go ahead and overtake the shuttle, and they're also going to apparently get the scientist. I didn't catch, by the way, was that also part of the plan? Like, did they know the scientist was on there and they wanted him for some reason, or did they just want the shuttle? Did you catch that?
I have the feeling that they were probably just after the shuttle, and I don't think they necessarily knew that Dr. Pershing, or I think that was his character's name, that he was necessarily on the shuttle. Okay. I think that was kind of like a pleasant surprise.
I have to ask you this. I'm big on the helmets. I like the helmets. I think it's part of the Star Wars motif, if you will, the Star Wars fashion. I really like it. I like helmets. I just like it. I've always have. I like the stormtroopers. I mean, stormtroopers in The Mandalorian are a big joke, but I like the stormtroopers. I always thought they were cool, because I remember the beginning scene of Star Wars when the stormtroopers are real stormtroopers and they annihilate all the rebels, and they were dangerous. And yes, they could shoot. And yes, they did hit things. They just didn't hit the heroes. That's where that joke comes from, is because you can't hit the heroes, because if you hit the heroes, they die. And then you don't have a story anymore. They have what's called plot armor. And that makes complete sense to me. But anyway, the pilots on the Imperial shuttle, they didn't have helmets on, and I kind of wondered about that. Did you wonder about that at all?
I didn't, because I felt like this episode had a lot of sort of those World War II, sort of like late 60s, 70s kind of. There was a vibe about this that reminded me of a lot of those films that Lucas took as inspiration, when he was creating the original Star Wars. So I felt like that was a deliberate choice, and I think that was intended to be kind of a callback to that idea. So I didn't find it that too terribly shocking, but so I didn't question it too much, because I thought that was a deliberate choice to kind of echo that World War II kind of idea.
Well, I know there was some sort of speculation among fans, and I didn't get into it too much. Were those particular actors famous or something, or is there some reason that you had to show their faces? Like, is there some significance to them? Like, I don't know, was it like father's brother or something like that? One of them, you know what I mean? Like, was there? I know there was something about that, about who are these guys, because there was some other people that were like, why do we see their faces? You know?
Well, here's the thing. To me, that whole scenario, because I felt like that scene actually did have some tension to it, and I thought it was well done, and I love the setup for that. I got to tell you, seeing Slave One like run those guys down and disable their ship and everything, I loved all of that. I love the music in there, and it was, again, for me as a Boba Fett fan, seeing Boba Fett just run these dudes down and disable their ship, that was a lot of fun. I love that.
I will say this, which I found interesting, was that Boba Fett didn't take his helmet off this episode, which I thought was really kind of cool. It does make me wonder if Tamora was actually in the armor, because I always have that question. You know what I mean? It's like, was he just not available that day, and they just decided to put somebody else in there, and it wasn't him? So I hope it was. I just got to say, I hope it was. And maybe we'll find out, because on Christmas, there is a new special episode of the Disney Gallery coming out. So maybe that's something that they'll reveal in there, talk about that, because they did touch on that in the original Disney Gallery. They did actually show at least two of the other people that are the Mandalorian, and should be regarded as the Mandalorian, in addition to Pedro Pascal, right? So
Right.
I would be interested to know whether he actually decided, hey, I'm Boba Fett now, and I've got the armor, and I'm not going to take my helmet off. You know what I mean? Because Boba Fett never did. Even though we've now discovered he's not really a Mandalorian, and basically his father was, and he just inherited the armor. He never took his mask off, right? Boba Fett never took his mask off in Empire or Return of the Jedi. He always had his helmet on. It gave him part of the mystique. It's one of the things I really loved about the character. And I did find it interesting that in this episode, Boba Fett doesn't take his helmet off.
I would, to be honest with you, I would think that Tamara Morrison did do all the scenes as Boba Fett. I mean, I can't confirm that, but I feel pretty. I would put $5 down on my desk right now that was him. $5. But I mean, I would do more, but that's a story for another time. But I mean, I would. I mean, I have a good feeling that was him. So in this scene, of course, they run him down. There's some dramatic tension. One of the pilots really kind of amps it up and gets kind of dark, where he talks about, I was on the Death Star, and I guess that we learn that tier.
How's that possible? I'm sorry, but I'm a lore guy, I'm a continuity guy, and these are the things that just really get to me, because I'm like, everybody on the Death Star died except for Darth Vader twice. Okay, the only person who escaped the Death Star was Darth Vader. The second one, well, I guess Darth Vader was probably already dead, but it was Luke and Vader, at least Vader's body, right? That escaped the second Death Star. Nobody else did. We never, there's even that moment, right? Where Tarkin himself on the original Death Star, which is the one he would have had to be on. Which, by the way, I thought that was a little weird when Cara Dune actually said which Death Star. It's like he's talking about the one that blew up Alderaan. That would have been the first one, right? That's your home planet. Don't you know all about that? Okay. Anyway, but he says that he was on the one that blew up Alderaan. Nobody escaped that one. Even Tarkin was offered, hey, should we have your escape, pod ready in case, something happens? Because it does look like they know what they're doing. Like they found the weakness. Like the Imperial officers had figured that out, that there was a danger in the tactics that the rebels were using on the Death Star run. And they offered him. One of the officers comes to Tarkin and says, hey, should we have your shuttle ready to go just in case? And he says, no. Which, if the guy on the top is saying no, all right, and this is the guy that obviously would have the most priority and all that kind of stuff, and he just says no, you think anybody else has a chance of getting out of that thing? I'm sorry, I just thought that was weird.
Well, I think it's possible too that he might have been lying. I mean,
that's also there. You go. That's actually good.
He was trying to get in her head, and he
was trying to get under her nerves, and he was just lying. I like that, Dave. See, that's why you should be writing this stuff.
But I get that, because the reason I say is because I think that's why she threw it back at him and she said, which one?
By the way,
I think
I totally feel like if you and I were like, if we knew Favre and Filoni, and you and I were just like talking to them, and I was pointing this out, and if we were all cool, let's just say, that they would be like, "Oh yeah, that's right, what Dave said," even though that's totally not what it was. They'd be like, "Oh, we kind of fucked that up, didn't we?"
Well, I just kind of took it that possibly, like I said, that he might have been lying.
Yeah, I like your explanation. I have nothing to counter it with. I mean, that could be it. I don't think it is, but I think that's a good explanation. He was just lying.
Sorry about that. I had to cough. I'm not under the weather, but when I do that voice and that whole bit,
you allow the Emperor to possess your soul, that you kind of have some dark side residual going up.
Yeah. And in case anyone was wondering, that's still watching, so the whole point of my little intro that I did there, what I was trying to do, which I explained this to Eric, was it was that scene where the Emperor is talking to Anakin from Revenge of the Sith, and it's the part where he says, "Once more the Sith shall rule the galaxy, and we shall have peace." So that was what I was trying to do. Kind of bad. So I'm going to put a cough drop in, so I hope I don't cough the rest of the show. So anyhow, we have this kind of scene with the dude. Kara shoots the guy, and now they have a captured Imperial shuttle, right?
Right.
And then the next thing they do is they go to a planet. I have no idea what planet it is. They don't really seem to spend a lot of time telling us what planet they go to, but apparently they go to this planet where Bo-Katan is. And I don't think it's the same one where he found her, but they go to this planet where Bo-Katan is. And I didn't realize this, but apparently the dude Mandalorian, he didn't make it in that last episode because he's not there. So I guess he did die when they were trying to take over that Imperial transport thing or whatever.
He died. I think he just wasn't in it. I mean, I would have to watch the episode again, but I don't think I noticed that too, that he wasn't there. But I don't think he died.
I think he might have bought it in that episode. I could be wrong, but anyhow, I love that scene where they come into the bar. I thought that was so cool, where you get Mando and then Boba Fett comes in, and they both, it was really cool. Has an obvious Western vibe, as a lot of the show does, but I just love that whole thing because I was like going, I could watch a show with just the two of them going around the galaxy, collecting bounties. I could totally watch that show all day long. So they come into the bar. The Mandalorian wants to get Bo-Katan's help, basically to get, obviously, Grogu, the child, back. And then we have an interesting exchange between Boba Fett and Bo-Katan and the wrestler lady, whose name I can't remember. To have an interesting exchange between them. And I thought it was interesting and kind of cool because a lot of insults being thrown around. But the one I found most interesting was where Bo-Katan says, "I've heard that voice 1,000 times," talking to Boba Fett. And it's interesting because it's like, that's right. Like she fought alongside the clone troopers. She would recognize his voice, and I thought that was an interesting way to kind of harken back and call back to a lot of that sort of backstory without spending a ton of time really talking about it. So I thought that was really cool. And I kind of liked all that stuff. And then I think probably the worst burn I've heard this whole season, where one character is trash talking another character, was when he was talking about, "I inherited this armor from my father," and she says, "Don't you mean your donor?" I was like, whoa, that's some pretty harsh words. What did you think about this scene, Eric?
Well, I really did like when they walked in. I did have a moment, a sort of a little bit of a fanboy moment when they first walked in. I thought it looked cool having Boba Fett and the Mandalorian together. But then from there, I'll be honest, I didn't really like the scene the way it played out, simply because I felt like the character on the left, the one that we don't know the name of, not Bo-Katan, the not Bo-Katan female Mandalorian, she gets into this scuffle.
Not Bo-Katan. That'll be her new name.
And that's all I'm going to refer to her as, because I don't have any respect for the character. I don't know who she is. The only thing I got into Clone Wars was the movie. I've said that a million times. I know Clone Wars because I watched the movie. I never really got into the series. I've seen a couple episodes here and there, a couple highlights, but I've never really gotten into Clone Wars. So I don't know who this person is. I have no allegiance to her. And so when she gets into this little fight with Boba Fett, and they kind of basically have like this little draw, I was all like, that's bullshit. You know what I mean? I'm just like, I'm sorry. This is Boba Fett. This is OT. This is original trilogy character. This is what started all the Mandalorian, hoopla in the first place. And, he should have just cleaned her clock. You know what I mean? But she's a female character, so that couldn't happen.
Well, I felt like they kind of held their own, but it
was a draw. I mean, it was a draw, but still, I'm like, this is Boba Fett. I'm sorry. No.
Well, I did find it a little strange because of what happened when we introduced Boba Fett. When we first
it doesn't make any sense. I'm just this is Boba Fett, okay?
Right.
And they tried to make a big deal that we actually got to see Boba Fett as a badass. There's always been those criticisms from a lot of people that say, "Oh, Boba Fett, he's only on screen for 10 minutes, and all he does is fall into the Sarlacc pit, and he's so lame, and blah blah blah." Because people have to be contrarians, right? Because something's popular, they have to be all like, "No, it's not cool." You know what I mean? Well, Boba Fett has endured. Okay, there would be no Mandalorian without Boba Fett. Give respect where respect is due. Jeremy Bullock, just recently passed, the real Boba Fett, as I call him, and it's all like, this is the character that you should have the most respect for. And it's all like to have this no-name character. I don't even know what her name is. I can't remember. And she holds her own with Boba Fett. I don't buy it. I don't like it. I don't understand what the purpose of that scene was, other than just show like, well, she's just as good as Boba Fett, really. Okay.
So again, we do have this clash between characters, and then the Mandalorian tells Bo-Katan, "Look, I know where Moff Gideon is. He's got this light cruiser," and so they kind of come to a tentative, sort of arrangement, because she's like, "Well, look, Moff Gideon is mine," and Boba Fett's like, "I don't care what you do. My priority is to get the child back. You can have whatever you want."
And also the Darksaber is hers. That's also very important. It's Moff Gideon and the Darksaber. That's why she's agreeing to help with this rescue mission, is because she wants the Darksaber so she can claim the throne of Mandalore.
Right, which we don't quite get all of that until later in this episode. But that is her overall.
Well, that was established in the previous episode. That her goal was to get the Darksaber because she wants to restore. She wants to be the leader of Mandalore. She wants to retake Mandalore, and she needs a Darksaber in order to do it.
No, I know that. What I'm saying is that there was a little bit more specifics to that in all honesty, I hadn't actually thought about until we actually get towards the end of this episode, because there's a particular set of circumstances under which she can only take the saber. It's so that, and I was like, oh yeah, I kind of remember some of that from the Clone Wars, but I hadn't really thought about it until we get to that point. So they have their tentative arrangement. So basically, we have Bo-Katan, the wrestler lady. We got Boba Fett. We've got Chris the Mandalorian. He has Cara Dune with him, and then also Fennec Chan, I think is her. The Imperial assassin lady is with them, and so they kind of put together their plan. Dr. Pershing gives them some information that helps them to kind of, figure out what they need to have happen in order to storm this cruiser. And then basically we're kind of off and running at that point, and they're going to pull off their plan. So they're in the Imperial shuttle, and the goal is going to be they're going to fly into the launching bay to basically prevent too many TIE interceptors from coming out. And Boba Fett's going to help put on a ruse that basically like he's after them, so that they'll just let them land immediately because they're going to be under attack. So this whole thing goes out. I like this scene. I really, really like this scene. I thought it was really well done. I never imagined I'd see, Cara Thrace, crashing the ship on a flight deck again. But anyhow, so Sackhoff is obviously flying the Imperial shuttle. Boba Fett's behind them. They're doing the whole thing. And this is what I was talking about, Eric. This is where I first started getting those shades of an episode of Buck Rogers, because when they show the TIE interceptors launching, it felt like when they used to shoot the starfighters and stuff out of the launching bay. Do you remember that?
Yes. Mm-hmm. That's also Battlestar Galactica, obviously. That's
yeah,
exactly.
Right, and it's obviously it's meant to kind of echo the idea or imply the idea of the catapult system that obviously is used on aircraft carriers. But still, I thought it was really kind of cool because I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of fun that they're doing that, right? Because there's a lot of stuff in this episode that I felt like, because I feel like with the Dark Troopers, like people are going to say, oh, that's like Iron Man. But to me, I felt
I definitely think that's what I said. That's exactly what I said last review. I think that's like Iron Man. I think you can clearly see Favre's influence, and that's Iron Man.
I still feel like it was kind of more Cylon and Terminator, but we'll get there. So anyhow, so the TIE fighter shoots out. We have the crash. They crash. I love the fact that Boba Fett took out those TIE fighters that were right on his tail. I thought that was really kind of fun. And then boom, he's gone, man. He's like, he's in, he's out. Like didn't even get a scratch, which I thought was awesome. The characters storm out of the ship. There's a gun battle. And then we kind of break them up. So we've got this attack group that's sort of supposed to be theoretically going to take the bridge, right, and take possession of the carrier. But at the same point, we also have
there's two different missions going on here, basically. So all the Mandalorian cares about is Baby Yoda. He doesn't care about anything else. He's made that very clear. And he's going in alone. He's not taking any chances. He's going to go rescue Baby Yoda by himself. That's his mission. That's all he gives a crap about. Meanwhile, everybody assumes, of course, that Moff Gideon's on the bridge since he's the commander of the ship. And that's where everybody else is going because that's Bo-Katan's goal. Bo-Katan wants Moff Gideon and wants the Darksaber.
So they split up into two groups. They're working their way through the ship. We get a bunch of different action scenes kind of here and there. And part of the dramatic tension with this episode is that, the Mandalorian has to basically get to the cell where they're holding Grogu or the child. He's got to get there in a certain amount of time because if he's late, there's the potential that they're going to be able to activate the Dark Troopers, which are basically droids, right? That's basically what they're basically imperial battle droids kind of idea. And it's interesting because I know for a lot of people, they're going to think about how this kind of is a callback, obviously, to stuff that we saw in the prequels, but it goes back even further than that. Eric, why don't you talk about the scene for just a second? I want to grab something real quick to kind of drive this point home.
You're talking about the scene where basically where the Mandalorian actually gets to where Baby Yoda basically is being held, which apparently it's apparently very close to the same area where the Dark Troopers are also being stored. And there's a kind of a little bit of a contrivance that I found I was like, okay. That basically they were saying that because the Dark Troopers take so much power, they're not on all the time. So apparently they're sort of like kept in cold storage, and then when they're needed, they're just activated, and it takes them like a minute or two for them to get rolling. I was like, okay, that never seems to have been an issue with droids before. I mean, they seem to always be kind of running around doing something, but whatever. So that was kind of a little bit of a contrivance. So the idea is that basically the Mandalorian is going to get Baby Yoda, rescue him, and then he's going to basically go and deactivate the Dark Troopers because they don't want to deal with them.
Now, what's interesting about this, the Dark Troopers, what I found interesting is I know that they're referenced in a video game, okay? But I feel like that these ideas of the Imperial having droids goes back even further, that they had this kind of concept. So this, if you can see it, if I can get it in frame without too much glare, this is Droid World. This is a Star Wars story. This is one of those books on tape. Do you remember those, Eric, where they had the books on tape, or they'd have I even
remember the books that came with records. I remember that.
Right. And now this is one of the ones that came with tape. Okay, so this is Droid World. Well, here's what's interesting about this. This Droid World, this is from 1983. Okay. And one of the things that they show in this story and they talk about are these war bots. Now, this doesn't obviously look like a Dark Trooper, but it's the idea that the Empire had these droids, right? That were basically kind of like what the battle droids were. What's interesting about this is the thing I think is kind of cool is when I was watching this, I kept thinking about how there's this one droid. Let's see. And basically he is an Imperial battle droid. Can you see that? Now he's red, right? But I thought it was really interesting because the whole time I'm watching this episode, I kept thinking about this old story, Droid World, and the Warbot and the idea of from the prequels. I just thought it was interesting because I know a lot of people were saying it's like, oh well, this is like Iron Man, or this is like this, or this is like that, and I could see the influence. And because Jon Favreau did Iron Man, I could totally see that. Makes a lot of sense. But to me, I kept thinking back to things like this. I kept thinking back like these old EU stories. I was thinking about the old video game. And I was thinking about that. I think that this also too is a little bit of a callback to the Cylons and also the Terminator. And I feel like you could definitely see the Terminator callback because the Mandalorian's trying to get there. He doesn't quite make it in time. The door is opening and he's trying to close the door and he's firing in there. And then one of these droids basically gets out and they have a fight. And it reminded me very much of, a little bit of the Rock'em Sock'em Robots too, but it very much reminded me of the Terminator because when he, activated the flamethrower, right, trying to see if that would get the thing to let him go. And when that fire was coming up all over and the way that it turned its head, I felt like that they were definitely thinking of the Terminator to one extent or another as well. But to me, I kept thinking of things like the Cylon. I was thinking of things of the Terminator, and I was thinking about these Imperial war robots from this old Droid World story. So I loved all this. I thought this was really fun. That's how I kind of interpreted this. So in the midst of the battle, the Mandalorian basically barely gets past this one guy, the Dark Trooper, and then he does the airlock thing from Aliens and sends all the rest of them out into space.
I thought that was really weird. I was just like, why would you store all the Dark Troopers, via an airlock? I was all like, that's a little convenient. You know what I mean? I thought that was kind of weird. I was just like, that doesn't make much sense to me, other than, I guess, unless that was actually meant for them to, if they actually could deploy as, in sort of flight mode or whatever. I guess maybe that's what it was. Maybe that makes more sense in that regard. So they could be deployed either internally or externally. Maybe that's the idea there.
Well, and see, I feel like that's what they showed us too, and later in this episode. I felt like that's exactly what it was for, because when they deployed the battle droids in the previous episode or two before, where they actually snatch Grogu, the child, we don't really see. We see them coming out, but we don't see exactly where they're coming out. So I definitely felt like that this is part of the only reason they got sucked down to space is because it wasn't pressurized. You know what I mean? And so that's why they just kind of got yanked out, because clearly we see later in this episode that, them flying in space and, boarding a ship is that clearly they're capable of that and they're equipped to do that. So all it kind of does at the end of the day, initially I was thinking, oh, you know what? That worked out pretty good. And then in the back of my head, as the episode's going on, I'm like, well, wait a minute. And about the time that I was like going, they're just going to come right back on the ship. That's exactly what they did. So the Mandalorian, he managed to barely get by these guys. He makes it to the cell where they're holding Grogu. And that's where Moff Gideon actually is. They have a little bit of an exchange back and forth. And it looks like Moff Gideon's like, we'll just take the child. I've already gotten from him what I wanted. And in the back of my head, I'm like, well, that's kind of an unusual choice, but okay. And then, of course, he turns on the Mandalorian, and then we finally get this scene that I think we've all been kind of waiting for, which is Moff Gideon versus the Mandalorian, Darksaber versus the Beskar spear. And I really enjoyed this scene. I thought it was kind of cool. I did feel like that. I thought that the Mandalorian was going to take a little bit more damage because of how they built up the Darksaber. And at one point, I kept thinking that the Darksaber might even cut the Beskar spear in half. And I wondered if we were going to get more of in the certain martial arts, they fight with the two sticks. And I wonder if we were going to get like sort of that kind of a thing. And it was going to turn out that the Darksaber could cut Beskar if it's in contact with it long enough.
Yeah, I had a real problem with this scene. Okay. First of all, to me, it doesn't make sense that the Darksaber can't cut a Beskar. In fact, to me, the significance of the Darksaber should be the fact that it can cut through pure Beskar because the Mandalorians wear this Beskar armor. So to me, it would make perfect sense that the special nature of the Darksaber is that it can slice through Beskar like butter. That to me would have made a lot of sense because remember, I know enough about the Darksaber to know this. The Darksaber was the lightsaber of the first Mandalorian that became a Jedi. Okay, that's the story of the Darksaber. That's where the Darksaber comes from. It was a Mandalorian that became a Jedi. He was the first Mandalorian to become a Jedi. And so he had the Darksaber. And it would have made complete sense to me that the Darksaber could cut through Beskar armor, which would make, of course, Moff Gideon extremely dangerous to anyone, including the Mandalorian. So I was really let down by this whole thing because I thought it was kind of silly that they said that the Darksaber, in fact, cannot penetrate pure Beskar. They said it can cut through anything else, which is basically any lightsaber. So it's like, so the significance of the Darksaber is actually something else, which they do get to a little bit later in the episode, that the significance of the Darksaber is not that it can cut through Beskar or that it's somehow special, it's a special nature than of any other lightsaber. There's something else to it. So I felt it was a little anticlimactic. Again, I never feel like these characters are in any real danger this season. And I really wanted Moff Gideon actually to like beat him, you know what I mean? And kind of have this moment where you're like, hey, we've got a villain here that can actually take on the main character and is stronger than the main character. And, the only thing that we really have is, well, there's the Dark Troopers, you know what I mean? He has some trouble with them, but otherwise it's like Moff Gideon kind of was weak.
Well, and this just to put into context, this is also where the Mandalorian is sneaking around in the ship. This is the moment where I started having, again, more of those feelings that this, more than a Saturday morning cartoon, that it felt to me more like an episode of the original Buck Rogers. Like this is getting back into that kind of tone. There was actually a moment where the Mandalorian is sneaking around, and with the musical cue, I was almost like going, were they looking at Buck Rogers? Like when they were talking about this scene, like, because it just, and let me just put it again, for me, this is not a bad thing. This is a good thing, and so that's kind of what this whole episode reminded me of, was like a fun episode of Buck Rogers, from back in the 70s. So we get the battle with Moff Gideon. I thought the choreography in the scene was fun. And I like the kickback he did with the spear. And there was kind of some fun stuff that they did. But I know, honestly, Eric, I was expecting the Darksaber to cut through the spear. And then I thought we were going to get the two stick thing. And it was going to, and I thought that's where we were kind of headed.
I really think they should have made it that the Darksaber can cut through Beskar. And that would have made it a lot different. It would have, made a real element of danger. You could have had the Mandalorian get hurt. Oh, you could have just done a straight up Empire callback and have him lose a limb, you know what I mean? Or something like that. Show that there's some real stakes. I really feel that they screwed it up on this scene. That's just me.
Well, and that's kind of what I'm saying. I think if it had cut through the spear, you know what I mean? And then the Mandalorian would have realized, well, shoot, if this thing comes to contact too much, my armor isn't going to protect me either. You know what I mean? And had, the battle be a little bit more intense. But again, for me, I was looking at this, it just felt like a fun episode of Buck Rogers. So I I honestly, it didn't bother me that much, but
it's really funny because I love Buck Rogers and I watch it to this day. They actually show it on a broadcast network called MeTV. They show it basically every Saturday night. They show an episode of Buck Rogers, and I find myself watching them all the time, especially if I'm not having reception issues, because I get it over the air on my antenna, and sometimes I do have reception issues. But I watch it all the time. To this day. By the way, the transfer is really, really good. They have like a HD transfer, and they did a great job on the Buck Rogers series in terms of how it looks on an HD TV. It really pops, and there's a lot of white and a lot of bright in that Buck Rogers series, and it really pops on an HD television with that great transfer. But I have to tell you, Dave, I didn't get any Buck Rogers vibe from this episode at all. I'm just putting it out there. I didn't get that at all.
And that's fine. Like I said, that's me. That was the vibe. There was just so many things that reminded me of the 70s Buck Rogers that was in this particular episode. You know, and you never know. The guy who directed this might take high offense that I even said that. But to me,
but you know what? We might find out. We might find out on Christmas Day on that Disney Gallery show. You may be completely correct. You may. Who knows? They may actually say that. But I think I always get like more of that Kenobi vibe. You know what I mean? Like that is a Star Wars thing. Kenobi sneaking around on the Death Star and stuff like that. Like, you know, Star Wars has its own thing with that. So I kind of feel like it would be more in that direction than necessarily Buck Rogers. But I could be wrong. And hey, we might have some proof one way or the other on Friday.
Well, like I said, that's kind of what I was seeing. And the vibe I was getting from it, it just reminded me of that. So again, the Mandalorian defeats Moff Gideon. He takes him up to the bridge, and that's where we get this other dramatic moment where it turns out that because the Mandalorian defeated Moff Gideon and spared him and had the Darksaber, we learn by what Cara Dune says that it sounds like that Cara Dune's going to be able to take this guy back, that there's a bounty that comes with him. So this is good so the Mandalorian, you could tell by bringing Moff Gideon back, he's trying to make sure everybody's happy. Cara Dune gets to bring in this major Imperial commander, right? They're going to be able to interrogate this guy. We got the clone guy. He's still alive. She's going to be like bringing in these major prisoners. Mandalorian's going to get paid. Like, I like that. I thought that was fun. Mandalorian's going to get paid, right? The kids say Bo-Katan gets her. Like, everybody gets what they want, right? Like, everybody wins. That's what the Mandalorian's trying to do. He's trying to have everybody win. And so there's this tense moment where Moff Gideon is like, it's like, oh, it's yours now. The Darksaber belongs to you. And the whole time I'm thinking, what is he taught? What? Why is he making such a big deal out of this? He's like, no, it belongs to her. And he offers it to her. And then he says, and this is what all of a sudden I started to remember Clone Wars. He's like, she can't take it. She can only take it if she wins it in battle. And I was like, oh, shoot. And that was where I was like, are you kidding me? Like, are they about to fight because of and you could tell by the way that Katie Sackhoff.
Look at this picture. Look at this picture. It encapsulates the moment perfectly because you can actually see it on Katie Sackhoff's face. I actually didn't notice that. That's really a great expression that she has on her face right there because, you know, there's that old saying that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And you can see that look. I mean, that's the Darksaber right there in the Mandalorian's hand. He's offering it to Bo-Katan. Bo-Katan has repeatedly stated this is her goal. She wants the Darksaber. This is how she can take the throne of Mandalore. This is how she can retake her homeland. This is how she can get the 12 colonies back. No, I mean Mandalore. I'm sorry. So this is how she can get Mandalore back, right? So, but look at that expression. And by the way, I just watched this episode a couple hours ago, and until actually putting up this image, I didn't see that performance in Katie Sackhoff's face. This is a great picture. I think this is a really great picture, and it encapsulates that. Oh shit! You know what I mean? This is not the way this is supposed to happen. And she was pretty clear. And it's like attention to detail, Mandalorian. She was pretty clear. I want Moff Gideon and the Darksaber, right? Not, and he didn't quite get it, right? He didn't quite get it because we've established that the Mandalorian is actually part of a different sect of the Mandalorians than Bo-Katan and her people. They are different sects. They are rivals, essentially. They have, the way is not the same for the two of them. So, and I think that's actually established in the Clone Wars, obviously. There's a civil war on Mandalore. So there are different Mandalorians that have different ways of looking at things. And our Mandalorian doesn't understand any of that. He doesn't understand the significance of the Darksaber. He doesn't even know what the hell a Jedi is. You know what I mean? So he doesn't know any of this stuff. He's just thinking, hey, I got Moff Gideon and I got the Darksaber. Everything should be good, right?
Right.
But it's not, because what he has done is essentially claimed the throne of Mandalore. He doesn't realize he is now like the king of the Mandalorians. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and that was this is the first moment in this episode that my jaw kind of dropped, because I never, until this moment happened, I hadn't kind of put two and two together, and I was like, wait a minute, and I was like, oh no, and I love the way Katie Sackhoff played this scene. Like, I thought she was great in this episode, but man, she played this scene just perfect, because you could totally read everything that was coming from her just from the expression on her face. And this whole, like, if you're watching her and her body language, and I thought this whole scene was really good. This is, like I said, this was another one of those moments that I felt like we got some really good dramatic tension.
Well, what you get at this point also is you get that, Moff Gideon is not a fighter. He's more of a tactician, right? So,
exactly,
which, by the way, I'm a little disappointed at. I kind of wanted him to be both, like Vader, because Vader is both a tactician and a fighter. That's why Darth Vader is probably might be the best villain of all time, quite frankly, because he's both. But Moff Gideon falls short on the tactical side, right? The fighting side. On the strategic side, though, he's a step ahead of everybody else, right? He knew this was going to happen. He knew this was going to happen, and there's sort of that devilish, grin, and the little twirling of the mustache as he takes off his top hat. You know what I mean? A little bit of like he knew this was going to happen. He knew what the Mandalorian was walking into.
And I thought it was really cool. So in the midst of all this, there's all this tension. We're like going, oh shoot, what's going to happen next? And that's when the Dark Troopers basically board back on the ship. And that's when he realized that sending them out into space didn't do any good. All it did was kind of buy him some time. So the Dark Troopers, they basically reboard the Imperial cruiser, and they're basically on their way to the bridge to basically kill everyone except obviously Moff Gideon and the child. So everyone's arming up. No one's really quite sure what to do. The troopers are getting close.
And by the way, we should mention, it's been established that blaster fire is completely ineffective against the Dark Troopers. That was established in the fight that the Mandalorian had with one single Dark Trooper, and the only way he was able to best the Dark Trooper was with his Beskar spear. That was the way that he was able to take down one single Dark Trooper. So now you have a platoon of them basically coming right back on the ship, and we've established that the blasters are completely useless against them.
And I was wondering if what was going to happen is if it was going to be Bo-Katan with the Darksaber and the Mandalorian.
She can't have the Darksaber.
I know, but just let me finish.
She can't have it. She can't have it.
I was wondering if that's what was going to happen, but as everyone's getting ready for the Dark Troopers to come in, everyone's grabbing their blasters. I'm like going, you all are going to die. Like, if you think this is going to be your solution, and no one really seems quite sure what to do, and you're like, well, what's going to happen now? And this is when the prophesized moment basically unfolded
as I had foreseen.
Anyhow, so basically what happens is in the midst of all this, and I'll be honest with you, I was kind of shocked they went there. This one lone X-Wing comes in, and I'm like, son of a gun, could I have been right? So this one lone X-Wing comes in. Now, when I say I was right, it's important for anyone who's watching this right now to understand. When I say I was right, I did not predict this at the beginning of season 2. I told Eric that if I was writing this show, this is how I would have essentially the Mandalorian's story end. And what I said, what I prophesized, if you will, and I have no insider information. I don't know anybody who works at Lucasfilm, none of that nonsense. I just, as a fan, if I was writing this, this is what I would have happen. A dire situation unfolds. The Mandalorian's hurt is more what I was thinking of. It looks like everything's going to be lost. There's no way in the world he's getting out of this. The child is in jeopardy, and it's over. Basically, it's over. It doesn't matter what happens. It's over for the Mandalorian, and the child's going to be in the possession of the Empire, and it doesn't really matter. And then Luke Skywalker would show up. And I even said, and the way I would do the scene is, you wouldn't immediately know it was him. You would just see the cloak, you would see his boot, and then eventually you would see that lightsaber. And the lightsaber would be your cue to let you know that it might be Luke. And part of the reason I said this is because it was a way in which they could do Luke Skywalker and get around the fact that, Mark Hamill's older and whatever else. And so I just thought, man, wouldn't it be really cool if they did that? But I never, in all seriousness, as much as I wanted to see it happen, because of how the films, the Disney trilogy films had gone, I pretty much thought that they would never do this. It felt to me like they did not like Luke Skywalker, that they thought Luke Skywalker was old news. So when they first show us this X-Wing come in and we see it's clearly a Jedi, and when they first start showing us where he's using the lightsaber, because there's no obvious musical cues to tell us who it is, and because you can't immediately see the color of the blade, I wondered if it was someone else, and they were just doing this as misdirection. But in the midst of all this, as it goes on, eventually they kind of do what I was imagining, and we do see that it is the green lightsaber, and then the possibility of it being Luke is even more possible. Now, this is the moment, Eric, where I had my fan reaction. Okay, now, unlike you, and then for those who may not know, let me start off by saying I'm perfectly healthy. Everything's fine. My first test is negative. I'm getting my second test on tomorrow, basically. But basically, I was exposed to COVID. And so I'm currently on quarantine, for anyone who's curious. So because of this, because I'm basically on quarantine and I was awaiting my test results, I, luckily enough, happened to be home so I could watch this before basically everyone on the friggin' internet tried not to spoil it, but basically I imagine spoiled it for almost everyone. So for any fellow YouTubers who are watching this, let me just explain a very basic, simple concept that I think some people don't understand. A lot of people go to work and they can't really see these things as soon as they first come out. So you might ought to give it a day or two. I literally saw a YouTuber, because I was waiting to see people's reaction after I finished watching the episode. And I went on YouTube and was watching it and watched these reactions. And there were some people that were already mad and complaining that they had, it's like, man, I don't know how many times I got to say spoiler alert. I'm pretty sure anyone who wanted to see this has already seen it. And that's not true.
Our guest Russ Emanuel from last week is a huge Star Wars fan. He has not seen a single episode of The Mandalorian Season 2 yet. It's not because he doesn't want to. It's because he's busy and he's in the middle of a huge Indiegogo campaign, and he's been doing, pickup shoots for staycation, and he has a life and he has a job and he has other things he needs to do.
It kills me because it's like, I don't think they realize how much sometimes, I understand you want to cover it because you got a YouTube show, you got this, you got that, bada bing, bada boom. I understand that concept, but at the same point, you have to understand some people can't watch this stuff right away. Some people can't stay up the night before. You know what I mean? So I was kind of surprised at how
some people are waiting for their kids to watch it with them.
Yeah,
so
it's like, I hate that Eric didn't get to see this without it being spoiled. Because
Yeah,
Eric,
and I have to admit, that might have changed my opinion a lot about all this, because if I hadn't been spoiled, it might have been more of, I guess, like a fan moment for me. But I will say, when I saw that X-wing, I did get a little bit of those chills going on and everything like that. And I did remember what you had said. So it was like, this is pretty interesting. So you got the one X-wing coming in, because I knew what was going to happen, but I didn't know how it was going to happen. Right. So when I actually saw the lone X-wing, and Cara Dune does this little like, oh, one X-wing, great. What the hell is that going to do? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
we're screwed. You know what I mean? That one X-wing is not going to help us. One, X-wing fighter pilot is not going to be able to stop these guys. So we're screwed. But I knew what it was, right? Because I'd been spoiled, and I do wonder if I would have known what that was if I hadn't been spoiled. I think I would have. I kind of think I would have. Just one X-wing cruising in. You know what I mean?
Well, I knew from seeing the X-wing, I knew it was probably the Jedi who had answered the call, right? Like I knew that.
That's kind of a given,
now,
right? Yeah.
Now immediately my initial thought was, is that Luke? Like, that was my initial thought. Okay. But as I was watching, until they showed the green lightsaber blade, I really honestly didn't think it was Luke, because I felt like they were trying too hard to tell us it was Luke. I felt like it was too obvious. The X-wing, the black cloak. I'm like,
by the way, you realize one thing. They didn't have to use the green lightsaber. And I wonder what the decision-making process was here, because if you recall, in Return of the Jedi, Luke Skywalker actually throws his lightsaber away. He actually throws it away. So there's every reason to believe Luke doesn't have that lightsaber anymore, and easily could have made it into a different color. And thus, when you see this Jedi walking around, he could have had a different color lightsaber to maybe give you a little bit more of, I don't know who this is. Because I think giving him the green lightsaber, that's a clear cue that this could be Luke, right? Because he's got the green lightsaber. And I do think that's to me, that's a little bit of a questionable choice, because I think Favre and Filoni had a clear path to give him a different color lightsaber to maybe just throw people off a little bit, maybe just provide a little bit more suspense as to who this cloaked figure is. Because we always see Jedis in cloaks. That's something that's pretty standard. So, for instance, there was a fan theory out there that Mace Windu was going to show up. I don't know if you heard this, but there was a fan theory.
Yeah, I heard that.
Mace Windu. So if he had a purple lightsaber, I can imagine some of the fans going crazy thinking, oh, my theory's right. You know what I mean? It is Mace Windu. And then all of a sudden it's Luke, right? And I could imagine the debates happening afterwards with all these fanboys going, that's so effed up. Why do you have a purple lightsaber? Only Mace Windu had a purple lightsaber. Luke has a green lightsaber. People forgetting Luke threw away his lightsaber and would have had to make another one. I'm just saying. See, that's why I'm saying I'm a lore guy. I pay attention to this stuff. So there was another avenue for misdirection, but I guess the choice ultimately that Favre and Filoni had was they kind of wanted you to know this was Luke, or be kind of anticipating this is Luke by having the green lightsaber.
And so when I saw the green lightsaber, I was already kind of on the verge of kind of an emotional reaction. And when I saw the lightsaber and I realized that it was Luke, that was when I could kind of feel the tears. Because by the time he gets out of that elevator, this is the first time in live action that they have ever given us the EU version of Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, this is not Jake Skywalker. This is actually Luke Skywalker. It's not Jake Skywalker from the Disney Wars. This is Luke Skywalker in The Mandalorian.
It is the Luke Skywalker. Yeah, it is the Luke Skywalker I read about in the Dark Horse comic books. This is the Luke Skywalker I read about in the Star Wars novels. Like, this is the Luke Skywalker. This is what I have been hoping to see when they were doing the new movies. This is what I'd always hoped to see. This is kind of, and I know it's fan service, and I don't really care. I'm kind of surprised because it's like, I know I've seen quite a few sort of like media outlet websites and whatever, and they're really kind of tearing into this episode because of the fact that they basically gave us EU Luke Skywalker. And they felt like, oh, well, this is just blah, blah, this. This is just blah, blah, that. And all I could think of is like, no, I don't understand what their complaint is because you already had the broken down Luke Skywalker. You guys got that in the movie. Why can't we as fans also get to see the EU Skywalker in live action for, a couple minutes? Anyhow, but this is when I had the emotional reaction, was when I realized it was Luke. And by the time that he comes in and he throws back the hood and we get the Luke Skywalker theme, this is the point where I could feel a tear running down my cheek. And it was I just was just overcome with emotion because this was, and I know the CGI face thing's a little weird for some people, but to me,
I think they did it too long. I think what they should have done is just had this one reveal and that's it. I think they held it just a little too long because just the opening reveal is all you need. Now you know it's Luke. The rest of the scenes you can show from the back of the head. You can do wide angles. You can do all sorts of other tricks. Because I did notice it was like they kept it a little bit too long, and then at some point it almost like his face shifted or something like that. Like it just wasn't syncing right. And it's like, first of all, I don't know if you really need to show the image I have up right now. I'm not sure if you really needed to do that. But if you're going to do it quick. And then just move on. You know what I mean? Do it quick so everybody knows who this is. This is Luke Skywalker. You know what I mean? And then like I said, there's all sorts of tricks you can use, with wide angles, shooting from the back, things like that, where you don't overstay your welcome. You know what I mean? When it comes to this kind of technology, especially I think on a television budget. I mean, I think that's probably also going on because I actually liked Tarkin in Rogue One. And I'm sure this is identical technology that they use. A lot of people criticize that. A lot of people didn't like Tarkin in Rogue One, and I thought it actually came out very well, and I really liked it. And I felt like you had to do it. You know what I mean? Like you just couldn't not do it. You know what I mean? So the technology is there, but perhaps because this is a television show, the technology and the budget isn't quite there. Because I did notice it's like, hey, you kept that a little too long, and now his face is starting to look a little wonky.
Well, and I could totally see what people were saying, but for me, I was just thrilled that they were actually trying to give us EU Luke Skywalker, and all I could think of, and here's the thing: I understand that theoretically this means that the child is going back to the Jedi Temple to be killed by Kylo Ren. We've already discussed all that. I don't want to think about that at this particular moment in time, but I remember. But at the moment. Wait,
where's my take?
Yeah.
There's two people on this show.
I know.
And but, that's coming.
I know, but
I let you talk.
Anyhow, let me finish my thought and then you can bring the mood down, Eric. So I just thought it was really cool because when Luke said, I would give my life to protect the child. And I was thinking of, at this moment in time, if there's anyone besides the Mandalorian who might be in a position to protect the child at this moment in time, I thought Luke was obviously a good substitute. You know what I mean? And I just loved the whole scene. I just thought it was great. Like I said, this is what I'd been hoping for with the new films, and they kind of showed us that Luke was there. Before he threw the lightsaber over his shoulder, like this is what I was hoping we were going to get. I just wanted to see that version of Luke Skywalker that I read about in the comics, that I read about in the books. Like I just wanted to see that after Return of the Jedi, I am a Jedi. I'm a Jedi Master. That I wanted to see that version of Luke Skywalker for just a little while. So
taking a new pupil. Yeah. That's also, what's going on here, right? He's actually taking a new pupil. That's kind of neat too when you think about that.
Yeah. So anyhow, go ahead and give us your thoughts.
We're not quite at the end, so I'm going to finish up the scene since you did go quite a bit there. So obviously, we do get a sort of touching moment with the Mandalorian. He does remove the helmet. I'm sure people know that, well, you maybe knew. I hate it when he takes off the helmet. I'm not into it. And I actually thought this was one moment where it kind of made sense. It kind of actually made narrative sense. Unfortunately for me, the previous episode kind of took away from it, because in the previous episode, the Mandalorian took off his helmet, and to me, it was a very contrived thing. I talked about it in our last review. The Star Wars face print or facial recognition thing has never really been a Star Wars thing. Not that it's ever been said that they don't do that, but I just thought it was silly because remember, pretty much all the troopers, right? All the troopers in Star Wars wear masks all the time. They wear helmets. They cover their faces. And it just didn't make any sense to me that an Imperial computer would accept the Mandalorian's face. Why? I mean, he's never been an Imperial trooper. So I actually thought this moment worked. I mean, I thought that this was great. I mean, because I thought that this was kind of cool because the Mandalorian has become a father figure to Baby Yoda. And Luke even says to the Mandalorian that, hey, it's not that Baby Yoda doesn't want to go with me. It's that he wants your permission. He wants your blessing. He wants you to say it's okay. You know what I mean? And so this was actually a really good moment. But unfortunately for me, I think it was a little bit taken away by the previous episode because those circumstances where he took off the helmet I thought were stupid. But in this context, I thought it was good. I just think it was, again, just kind of the previous episode took a little bit away from this particular moment for me.
So what you're saying is the dark side of the face impacted your enjoyment of this moment.
Yes, I would say that. I would say that's correct, Emperor. And I'm glad to see you're back. So, and I know, by the way, Emperor, that it was actually you speaking through Dave, and you were the one that foresaw what was going to happen and that Luke would be back and all that stuff. I know that. I know that. That's the truth about it.
Do what must be done, Eric. Acknowledge the power of the dark side.
So now we have one more scene, right? We have one more big scene, one more big reveal after this scene. And then we can kind of get into a little bit of speculation for next season and what the implications are of all these different things that happened in this episode. Because obviously Luke has taken the child. The Mandalorian has unmasked himself in front of everybody, by the way. This is in front of Cara Dune. This is in front of the sniper. Gosh, I can't remember the sniper lady's name. And also the Bo-Katan and the non-Bo-Katan Mandalorian. So, I mean, he's revealed himself basically to everyone at this point, which I think should have implications later. We'll see whether it does or not. But the big other reveal that everybody's been talking about and, has a lot of people speculating on the future of the Mandalorian and what's going on is the teaser for the book of Boba Fett. That is going to be its own thing. We are getting a Boba Fett series. I've always said that the Mandalorian was supposed to be the Boba Fett series. And interestingly enough, it is in fact the springboard for the Boba Fett series. And the last image we get is a Boba Fett taking over Jabba's palace, which I thought was a really interesting moment. I know one of the fan gripes for this is, wasn't everybody dead already anyway? Didn't they all die on the sail barge? You know what I mean? But apparently not all of them did. Apparently there were still some people left at the palace, including Jabba's right-hand man, which I can't remember his name.
Bib Fortuna.
What is it?
I think it's Bib Fortuna.
Fortuna. He had taken over as apparently as the kingpin for Jabba's criminal organization. And Boba Fett takes over, which I think is really kind of weird, to be honest with you. I don't know. I like the imagery. I think the imagery is really cool of Boba on, on Jabba's throne, because and by the way, Jabba's throne is actually not the throne. Jabba's throne is actually what's below it. If you notice, I actually had to take the little strip down so you can see it. That Jabba's throne is actually that big platform underneath the chair. The chair was for the other guy, but Jabba's throne is that thing underneath. And so Boba has now apparently taken over Jabba the Hutt's organization, which I thought was kind of weird. It's a little interesting because I've never thought of Boba Fett as any kind of like a kingpin or anything like that. Boba Fett works alone, for one thing. Now he's not. I mean, he's clearly working with his little cybernetic friend, which, by the way, remember, she is a cyborg. She died, and Boba apparently used cybernetic parts to bring her back to life. So, they're now a team. They're now a thing. And apparently Boba is going to take over Tatooine.
I find none of this unusual, Eric.
and why is
Clearly,
that, Emperor? Because I know when Boba Fett worked for you. Well, actually, I don't know if he worked for you directly. I know when he worked for your apprentice, when he worked for Darth Vader. Typically, Boba Fett worked alone, and he was a very hands-on guy. It wasn't like he directed, squads of troopers or even teams of other bounty hunters. He worked alone.
But when you ascend to rule, Eric, it is necessary to have someone to help complete your vision of the universe, and a cybernetic sidekick is clearly a great choice.
I love
that choice, and I love to see Boba Fett finally embrace his darker nature, to let his anger make him powerful, make him stronger.
And James, thank you. Yes, it's Bib Fortuna. Yeah, Bib Fortuna. That was the name that we were trying to figure out earlier. Yeah, Bib Fortuna. Thank you, James.
I once had a Sith cat who also liked tuna.
Do they have cats in Star Wars? I don't remember ever seeing a cat in Star Wars. All right, well, we're splitting hairs at this point. So anyway, obviously, one of the big things that's out there is there going to be a season 3 of The Mandalorian, or is Boba Fett taking over the show, essentially? Because the Book of Boba, the Book of Boba Fett, is it Book of Boba or Book of Boba Fett? I can't remember what the actual name of the new series is. That series is going to be coming out a year from today. It's going to be coming out basically around Christmas time. And so there is a lot of speculation about whether, how or when Mandalorian season 3 is going to come out. But I have heard that James Favreau has said, yes, there will indeed be a season 3 of The Mandalorian. So it's not the Book of Boba Fett. Apparently, we have not seen the last of The Mandalorian. I think clearly what's going to happen is the Mandalorian is also going to ascend. He is the now rightful ruler of Mandalore because he has inherited the Darksaber in battle. And so I think Bo-Katan is going to defer to him and make him sort of like her puppet in a lot of ways, I think is what's going to happen. So there'll be an interesting dynamic between the two of them going forward, because I don't think they're going to fight. I don't think they're going to fight for the Darksaber. I don't think that's where they're going to go. So my prediction for season 3 of The Mandalorian is that it's going to be basically about retaking Mandalore.
What a shame that Bo-Katan does not understand the principle of giving in to her dark side.
You never know. She could. We could see a different side. I don't know much about Bo-Katan. Actually, I don't know, Emperor, if you had been involved very directly in the Mandalorian Wars. I didn't watch the Clone Wars series that much, unfortunately. So I don't remember if you personally were involved much with that, and if you knew exactly what was going on, or even if you really knew much about Bo-Katan. I don't know if she was kind of like insignificant to you. So.
In the great scheme of things, she is insignificant to my plan. But I did pull all of the strings and orchestrate everything. How else could I have become the ruler of the known universe? How else could I have established the first galactic empire?
True. Very, very true. Now, James Stone, in regards to my comment earlier about whether there were cats in Star Wars, he does say, well, Han Solo was a cool cat. And James Stone, I can't argue with that. Actually, I think the Emperor would take a little bit of offense about that. I don't think the Emperor was much of a fan of Han Solo. I think he was a rebel scum. I think that's kind of the way that you would have referred to him, Your Highness.
It's true. They were an annoyance. But in the end, I'm still here.
Actually, you're dead. Your granddaughter, that was your whole plan. Remember that your plan did happen. It's just that, you're dead. Anyway, Hollywood Jackson, he actually gave us a little hello over there. And I think, is that a peace sign or is that or is that devil horns? I can't tell. I'm sorry, Hollywood Jackson. I'm not trying. Oh, here we go. Space Cats. There we go. Hollywood Jackson, Space Cats. I think that's a different show, actually. I think there was a show like Space Cats or something like that at one time. But one last thing, Emperor, do you have a prediction for the Mandalorian Season 3, or for that matter, for the Book of Boba Fett?
Well, Eric, let me just clearly state that for those of you who have not particularly enjoyed The Mandalorian, I do feel like that this is your jumping off moment. The story very clearly comes to an end, and all you need to know is that my plan unfolded as I had foreseen it, and I am ruling the galaxy. Nothing else matters.
There you go. Straight from the Emperor. Now, kind of to bring it full circle in that, Jane had an earlier comment where she said, do you think The Mandalorian, was toned down for kids? Jane, obviously, one of the things I've kept saying is I feel like the writing is very Saturday morning cartoonish. So I think it was, well, actually, I have heard Favreau and Filoni say, absolutely, this show is made for kids. Because they believe that's what George Lucas made Star Wars for, because that's what George Lucas has said repeatedly, that Star Wars is for kids. Sorry, all of us grown 40-plus adults like myself. I am in that category. That's what George Lucas has said. I've always said Favreau and Filoni are the Lucas loyalists of Lucasfilm, and I think that they're still going with that it is made for kids. But, to wax poetic for a moment, my daughter, who was a Mandalorian fan, couldn't find time to watch this episode with me this weekend because she would rather be watching Roblox. So I don't know where that puts us. I did mention this before. Clearly the most popular character, actually for a lot of us, but for kids especially, is Baby Yoda. I've said that many times. To me, this is the Baby Yoda show more than it's the Mandalorian. Baby Yoda was everything that the marketing was about, everything that like the memes are about. It's all about Baby Yoda. And now Baby Yoda's gone. So it's going to be interesting to see how they go forward with this. In a lot of ways, I kind of feel like you've got Rangers of the New Republic, right? You've got the Ahsoka series. You've got the Boba Fett series. They're all in the Filoni-verse, right? Or it's a Favre-verse, right? Favre created the Mandalorian, so we'll call it the Favre-verse, right?
I created all of this, Eric. This is all because of my plan.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is, do we really need The Mandalorian as an individual show anymore when we've got 3 other shows clearly in the same continuity? And I did touch on this when we were talking about Disney Investor Day and all these different shows that Kennedy was talking about. These shows specifically, again, are in that Favre-verse. I'm calling it the Favre-verse. And one of the hopes I have, because I pointed out many, many times, and Your Highness, Dave really hates this when I point this out, the implication of Luke saving Baby Yoda is that Baby Yoda will be killed by Kylo Ren in the new Jedi Academy. Okay, that has been established in Disney Wars. The hope that I have, and there's a lot of speculation about this, is because there are so many different shows that apparently have been greenlit and movies. I think there's at least 2 movies and all those projects that were greenlit. By the way, remember, they didn't announce Boba Fett. Boba Fett was specially announced at the end of Mandalorian. So now we know there's going to be a Boba Fett series. There is some speculation that Star Wars might play with the whole multiverse idea. And that's kind of my hope going forward. That's the only way I feel like you can fix what they've done in the man. The only way to fix it is to start some sort of divergence where there's going to be a different timeline with what I'm calling the Favre-verse. So I don't know if that's actually going to happen, but I think the writer in me says that's the only way to fix this.
So you're saying you sense a disturbance in the Force?
I would call it a divergence in the Force.
A divergence in the Force. Well, to go back to Jane's comment about if this show was made for children, I do like the idea of seeing the Mandalorian strangle the stormtrooper, not because I like seeing my own forces diminished, but because I do like to know that children are being introduced to the dark side of the Force in their entertainment. Only then can they discover their true power and begin to understand how to embrace the dark side.
Yeah, that's a good point there, Your Highness. That really is. You got to start them young. I agree with that. I've always agreed with that philosophy that you got to start them young. Now, James Stone says, I felt that considering I was excited for the series and enjoyed it even up to the Baby Yoda reveal, I have faith they can keep me interested. And James, I totally think that that's a perfectly valid viewpoint. They've done a lot right. Even me, I'm critical of a lot of stuff in The Mandalorian. I really am. It's because the writer in me. It's the writer in me, and then there's the fanboy in me, and sometimes they're in eternal conflict with each other. I think, Your Highness, you understand that kind of thing, the duality of because I'm sure there's sometimes you think like, sometimes you feel like maybe I should do something nice. You know what I mean? And it's kind of like this thing that's fighting inside of you. You know what I mean? Where you're like, it's the struggle between the dark side and the light side.
There is no struggle.
There was that moment. There was that moment in Revenge of the Sith. That tender moment you had with Anakin where you saw him beaten and you weren't scowling at him. You didn't berate him. There was that actual moment of tenderness where you could tell you felt for Anakin and the fact that he had been beaten by Obi-Wan. There's that little moment. I saw it on screen.
I don't know of what you speak of.
I know you don't like to admit it. Sometimes the light side does pull at you a little bit.
But it is important to remember that eventually, hopefully soon, we will get back to the real hero of this story, and we will discuss me.
Again, I thought it was Rey. The whole plan, right, was for you to have Rey.
I don't understand. I don't understand why you keep bringing up my granddaughter. What does she have to do with any of this? I told you I'm alive. I'm here.
All right. Well, I guess we'll leave you then, Your Highness, with the last word on our review of The Mandalorian, Chapter 16, The Rescue. And Dave, can you come back so we can maybe do a little bit of pop culture and streaming wars?
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry about that. I don't know what's happening. I keep feeling this weird pull, and before I know it, I don't know. I feel like I'm someone else or channeling someone else. I don't know. It's weird.
I've always felt that you had that dark side to you.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yes, I know that was a very bad pun, by the way, but it was intentional. Pun was intended. So, Dave, do you have anything for pop culture? Let's move right along and get into some pop culture news. Do you have anything for pop culture news?
I do. So here in the pop culture news segment, we talk about anything that's interesting that's happening in the world of pop culture news. Hopefully something that we think you will find worthy of discussion. That's what I like to cover here in pop culture news. Now, let me cue this up because, again, like I said, I felt like I was being pulled in a different direction. So I'm not sure how to bring this up because I don't have both screens going at the same time. So let me see the best way to try and share this. Let's see here. So what I'm going to try to do here is share my main screen. And then I'm going to try and pull this back up. Okay, here we go. So here for my first story, and again, I apologize as always with these sites. We got 10,000 to do with their ads on these pages. But anyhow, so this is coming off of comicbookmovie.com. I thought this was interesting, worthy of discussion. This is from a couple days ago. I can't remember exactly when this story ran, but it says Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige shares surprising new Moon Knight and She-Hulk details. And it basically states, I'm not going to read the whole thing. We're just going to read just enough about this to actually get into a discussion. He has shared some surprising new details about the Moon Knight and She-Hulk TV shows coming to Disney Plus, revealing the format of the latter and more. Tatiana Maslany, and I apologize if I'm saying her name wrong, was confirmed as She-Hulk after denying it repeatedly, by the way. Is confirmed as She-Hulk's Jennifer Walters during Disney's Investor Day, but it appears Oscar Isaac has yet to sign on the dotted line to take on the role of Mark Spector in Moon Knight, which I'd still like to see. I can't remember his name now. He's a great martial arts actor. Darn it, I can't remember his name. But anyhow, we'll move on. We're keeping everything crossed that the deal is eventually worked out, but in a recent interview with Emmy Magazine, Marvel Studios' Kevin Feige shared some new details on both the Disney Plus TV shows. In the case of Moon Knight, and this is what I wanted to talk about because I think most people who've watched the show know I'm a huge Moon Knight fan. In the case of Moon Knight, the executive described Spectre as an action hero who jumps out of buildings and gets into fights. Sounds pretty standard, right? Well, he went on to note that as well as exploring ancient Egyptian iconography, Moon Knight will follow the character, a former Marine, and has issues with dissociative identity disorder. In fact, his mental illness is a unique aspect of the series. That's probably what intrigued Isaac too. And then as for She-Hulk, Feige dropped a bombshell that it's going to be a half-hour legal comedy, as that's a genre Marvel Studios has never done before. Apparently, John Byrne's comic book run has served as the main inspiration for the series, so looking to those comics for clues might be smart. And then, of course, this is the John Byrne version of She-Hulk. I read that series and quite liked it back in the day. I'm kind of surprised they're going in that direction because I know a lot of people kind of seemed to kind of take issue with the fact that they didn't like sort of the comedy aspects that they introduced with the Hulk in Endgame. Some people seem to not like a lot of that.
I didn't. I do not like the. Well, but the other thing is, I'll be honest, I don't like Mark Ruffalo. I don't like him. I don't like him as an actor. There's something about him that just, it's like, chalk. It's like your nails on a chalkboard. It just annoys me. I don't like it. I like the Hulk. I'm just crazy like that. I think the Hulk is cool. You know what I mean? So it's like, I want to see the Hulk. And I don't want to see him. Like what I really like Infinity War. Infinity War is probably one of my favorite MCU movies and probably pretty high up there as far as movies in general. And the biggest criticism I have of Infinity War is what they did to the Hulk, just so we could see Mark Ruffalo. And I hate that. It goes right back to my criticism of the Mandalorian sometimes and Pedro Pascal and that stuff. It's like all these actors, they get into these roles, these genre roles, where you're like a superhero or you're a space trooper or whatever it is, and your face is obscured, and every 5 seconds they've got to take the mask off. And they've got to show their glorious mug, which I'm sorry, Mark Ruffalo is not that good looking a guy. I'm sorry. He's just not. You know what I mean? Roddy Downey Jr., very good looking guy. Okay? Very good looking guy. I get why he wants to show his glorious mug all the time. But he's Iron Man. And Iron Man doesn't show his glorious mug all the time because he's Iron Man and his face is completely covered. So I always get annoyed by that kind of stuff. So for me, I like to see the Hulk. I like to see the Hulk. And I think this whole idea of a superhero comedy, I don't know. We'll see if this works. I mean, they've tried many times with an intentional comedy, which is The Tick, right? The Tick has been in live action twice, and basically failed both times, even though I think The Tick is great. I like the cartoon. I love the animated series of The Tick. I thought it was really, really well done. And I thought that character is really fun. You know what I mean? But, it's a tough sell. I'm a fan of Plastic Man. Plastic Man is another one in that genre of the comedic, superhero genre, that sort of subgenre, right? Where you have these superheroes who are supposed to be comedic. And I really like Plastic Man. In fact, I used to watch the Plastic Man cartoon, which had live action elements. I don't know if you ever watched that show, but they had a Plastic Man cartoon where they had a live action host who was Plastic Man. So they had live action segments along with the animated segments. And I liked that show growing up as a kid. I haven't seen it since, but I remember as a kid really liking it. But it's a tough sell, and I don't know if I would have done that with She-Hulk. I think a lot of people were kind of hoping She-Hulk was going to be more badass and be out there like, smashing things.
Well, it's interesting too, because there's actually a really good run of the Hulk going right now, which is actually Immortal Hulk, and I purchased a lot of the Immortal Hulk collections because they had them on sale in Comixology, and I've been reading through them and really enjoying Immortal Hulk and the concept and the approach that they're taking with that character. And so when I was thinking about the She-Hulk series, I was thinking that what they were going to do is they were going to borrow some classic elements of She-Hulk and then maybe mix them with some more modern contemporary elements from the current Hulk series. But after reading all this, I realized that if they're just going to pull inspiration from the John Byrne run, number one, that was a great run. That's a good one to pull inspiration from. But I was a little surprised. To me, it sounds like Ally McBeal with superpowers, and I feel like haven't they tried to do that before?
By the way, I could see that as the pitch because there's always those log lines that they use pitches, and I could totally see them Feige telling Disney, hey, this is going to be Ally McBeal meets the Hulk. You know what I mean? Something like that.
Right. Yeah. So we'll have to see how it comes together. I am honestly more excited for Moon Knight. I'm trying to see if they've got a good image of Moon Knight. I don't think they've got a really good one on here. I'm more excited to see, in all honesty, there's this little image here on the corner. I'm more excited to see what they're going to do with Moon Knight. And I do like what they say in here about how they're going to be approaching it. And I do like the fact that they are going to embrace the fact that, unlike Batman is somewhat schizophrenic, but I don't think he'd be, necessarily someone would probably find him clinically insane, but I don't think that he would necessarily need to be admitted. And what's interesting about Mark Spector is that, Mark Spector is insane. He does actually think he sees three different people. And that's part of the thing that makes it interesting. And depending upon the writer, the way Doug Munch approached it was very different from how some of the other writers approached it. So depending upon the take, it'll be interesting to see if they go full into it or if it's an alter ego thing with a bit of a confusion, when they switch from one to the other. I'm just really interested to see how they approach this and how far they take this angle, because that's the thing that's going to make this particular show truly unique. Is I don't think they've delved this far into it. And plus, also, as I stated previously in a previous episode, I'm also excited for the fact that hopefully with Moon Knight, we're going to get the introduction of the Werewolf by Night. This is going to hopefully lead the way into Blade, and the vampires and sort of the more occult, supernatural aspects of the Marvel Universe. I'm hoping that Moon Knight's going to begin to lead us into those worlds, because, again, Mark Spector was originally hired in the original Werewolf by Night, his original appearance. He was hired and outfitted by this group essentially to capture and then hopefully kill the Werewolf by Night. That was his whole thing. He was a mercenary. They hired him. We're going to give you these gadgets. They were all dipped in silver because they're going to hurt the werewolf. And then that was kind of like his whole thing for his first couple of appearances, his first two, is that he was basically just a mercenary hired to take out Jack Russell, the Werewolf by Night. So I'm hoping that we're going to keep some of these elements and we're going to introduce, kind of the more supernatural and the occult, as well as delve into the Egyptian iconography and the Egyptian mythology, the fact that he gets his powers from Khonshu, the Egyptian god of the moon. And if they're going to do that, where it's like his power, like he really does have powers, or he's just insane and thinks he has powers. It's going to be interesting to see the approach. I'm very excited for Moon Knight. The She-Hulk thing, we'll see. But I'm very excited for Moon Knight.
Well, speaking of She-Hulk, James Stone had mentioned they tried Ally McBeal with superheroes, and that was the pitch for the horrible Wonder Woman pilot. And actually, I think you saw that pilot, didn't you, Dave? We've talked about
Wonder
Woman pilot where I think a lot of it, she is like a lawyer or something like that, right? You've seen it, right? You've actually seen that pilot, haven't you?
I saw most of it. I don't think I saw all of it in totality, but I did see quite a bit of it. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't think it was that bad. What they did with the movie version is significantly better, but I didn't think it was, all that, horrible. But I also kind of feel like they might have made the right call. The most interesting thing about that actually is, for me anyway, when I think back on it, is the fact that they did find a really great actress who actually went on to play Mockingbird in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which I love Mockingbird, for those people out there who even knows who I'm talking about. I love Mockingbird from the original comics. And then the fact that she went on to actually play Commander Grayson in The Orville. And that she's turned out.
That's right. Okay. Okay. That's I think how I got
it. Of course, she also played Lady J.
She also played
Lady J, Eric. I always forget about that.
Okay. But we had talked about this pilot on a previous episode. And actually, at the time, James, right, I was actually advocating that they release it because I wanted to see it. I think that it would be interesting to see a lot of these failed pilots, quite frankly. I think that it would be kind of cool to just have a show of failed pilots. I think that would be kind of neat, like an anthology series that's just failed pilots. But I've never seen it, James. I've actually never seen it. I've seen the images from it. And personally, I thought that Wonder Woman, the actress that Dave was just talking about, the one who's in the Orville, I thought she looked pretty good. You know what I mean? Even though the outfit was different, I kind of liked the look of it. But I never saw it myself. And James goes on to say it's okay, but it's very forgettable. So maybe I'm not really missing anything, James. Yeah. Maybe that's what it comes down to, is I'm not missing much. But I would like to see it. I would like to see it. I'd be interested. But I think James makes a good point that that apparently this kind of contrivance has been tried before.
And I'll be honest with you, if anyone's going to be able to pull it off, it's going to be Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios. When they said they were going to work up to an Avengers movies, I rolled my eyes. I was like, "There's no way you're going to. If you even make it to an Avengers movie, I don't know if you're going to be able to hold people." Not only did they make it to an Avengers movie, they made several Avengers movies. And then when they first started talking about, Guardians of the Galaxy is going to be great, and I was just like, "Are you kidding me?" Because I remember back in the day, it was kind of always discussed, at Marvel that Guardians of the Galaxy was essentially their Star Wars. And I'm like, I was like, no, Star Wars is Star Wars. You guys have got this little thing over here. And I just thought it was weird because I could never kind of wrap my head around, what do you mean that Guardians of the Galaxy is your Star Wars? It is not. And then lo and behold, look at what
That's
they did.
That's kind of the way I saw it, to be honest with you. I've always seen Guardians of the Galaxy as Marvel's Star Wars. That's the way I saw it when I watched the movie. You know what I mean? It's exactly what I thought. It was just a fun movie, and it was very Star Wars.
Well, yeah, the movie, yes. But what I'm saying is, as someone who actually at one point worked on Guardians of the Galaxy, I'm just telling you, when they used to say, "This is our version of Star Wars," I would just roll my eyes. I'd be like, "Sure it is." You guys used to publish Star Wars. Maybe you're confused. I never understood that correlation. I never really thought it could be like that. I mean, I thought when they first started doing Guardians of the Galaxy, I'm thinking of things like, Space Raiders, that old Corman movie, or, something like Ice Pirates, or, I was just like going, there's no way, when you look at all the attempts where people have tried to, somehow capture that magic and make their own version of Star Wars, you don't just say, we're going to do it and then turn around and do it. So the fact that they actually pulled it off is pretty amazing. So that's what I'm saying. If someone could actually pull off this Ally McBeal with superpowers, Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios, they're probably the one people that might be able to do it.
Very possibly, very possibly. But actually, since we are going full circle and we are actually talking about Star Wars again a little bit, there was some very sad news that came out recently, which is that Jeremy Bulloch has passed. This is a BBC News article. It says Star Wars Boba Fett actor Jeremy Bulloch dies, age 75. And there's a picture of the man himself. It says he died in hospital on Thursday from health complications after living with Parkinson's disease for many years, his agent said. This particular celebrity death, really hits home. My father actually died of Parkinson's. My father had Parkinson's and struggled with Parkinson's disease for a very long period of his life. But I actually met Jeremy Bulloch. I actually got a chance to work with him. I was a staff member for the Phoenix Comic-Con. And I actually was the film festival director the year that Jeremy Bulloch came to our event. And we actually had this very obscure fan film, the Star Wars fan film that was made in the UK. Actually, kind of a silly film, to be honest with you. But the reason I showed it was Jeremy Bulloch actually appeared in it. I wish I could remember the name of the film. I probably have it in my archive somewhere because I have an archive of a bunch of the films that I showed when I was the film festival director for Phoenix Comic-Con. And one of the things that I did was I had asked permission if I could ask Mr. Bulloch if he would actually appear on stage and introduce the film since he's in it. You know what I mean? Because we were actually showing a film that he was in. And I got the green light from the convention director to ask him. So go check if it's okay with him. And it was just so nice dealing with him because I'll tell you, I've got tons of bad celebrity stories from my time with the Phoenix Comic-Con, especially when I used to go to San Diego Comic-Con and invite celebrities to come to Phoenix Comic-Con because it was a very new organization at the time. I got treated very badly by a lot of people that treated me like dirt, okay, because they didn't know what the Phoenix Comic-Con was. It wasn't the big thing it is today. And so I always never knew how a quote unquote celebrity was going to react to me, when I went over and talked to them, because I have a lot of bad stories. I'll be honest, I have lots of bad stories, but Jeremy Bulloch is not one of them. When I went to Jeremy Bulloch, he was just like delighted. You know what I mean? Very much the Englishman and all that kind of stuff. Very, very class act, just very nice, very much like, of course, I would love to do that. I would love to go over and introduce this film. You know what I mean? That sounds wonderful. And a little aside to that was the actor, and gosh, his name escapes me at the moment. The actor who played Tweaky. We were talking about Buck Rogers actually during our Mandalorian review. The actor who played Tweaky, the actual actor, not the voice. He's a very small man. He was there, and he was sort of like a last-minute addition. And he and Jeremy Bulloch were friends. And actually, we had like this little staged moment where the two of them, we basically surprised him, where Jeremy Bulloch, we surprised Jeremy Bulloch with, his friend appearing at the show, and the two of them were sort of rapping. And I thought that was interesting that the two of them were friends. It's kind of funny because what happens is a lot of these people, even if they weren't part of the same franchise, or if they're part of the same franchise, but different shows, different movies, never directly work with each other, they become good friends on the convention circuit. That happens a lot in these kind of environments. So, really something that I thought was a really sad thing about his passing. I really wanted to see him show up in The Mandalorian, and I feel it's such a shame that he didn't. And I imagine one of the reasons, I'm kind of hoping at least one of the reasons, was that they didn't put him on there was because of his health, because I would hate to think that they never considered putting the real Boba Fett in The Mandalorian.
So I also got to meet Jeremy Bulloch at a convention many, many years ago. He was one of the original cast who I had always wanted to meet. Boba Fett's been one of my favorite Star Wars characters since I had the little action figure when I was a kid. I don't know where it's sitting out here in the studio somewhere. I'm not exactly sure where it is. But I have the same, Boba Fett action figure I had when I was a child. And I'd always wanted to meet Jeremy Bulloch. And we had been at different conventions over the course of the years. Some people who might be watching the show may not be terribly familiar, but I used to work for Marvel and DC Comics, and I've done my fair share of conventions over the years. And I just never seemed to really have the time. And I'm glad because I think it was a Phoenix Comic-Con. I think it was that. My wife had come over and she had heard me constantly talk about that I wanted to get over and meet Jeremy Bulloch. And she's like, you know what? I was just over there. There's not a big line or anything. If you want to go there and talk to him, since you just finished your commissions of sketches for people, it might be a good time. Why don't you just get up right now and go over there? And it's weird because whenever it's someone who I have thought about since I was a kid. It's really hard for me to just get up and walk over there. Like I feel really awkward and weird, and I don't really know like how to go about it. And
In there.
so my wife, yeah, and so my wife was like, no, we're gonna go. And so she kind of took me by the hand. She asked someone to watch the table, and she walked me over there. And Jeremy Bulloch, it was interesting because every time I looked over there, he wasn't actually behind the table. He was in front of the table, shaking hands, talking to people, taking pictures. I mean, engaging with the fans, not just kind of sitting behind his table and, oh, you want an autograph picture? You wanted this, you wanted that. It was very different. Like he was very personable. He was there for the fans.
Yeah.
And it reminded me very much of my very first convention experience when I met James Doohan, because James Doohan was the same way. James Doohan was there for the fans. You know what I mean? And so it was just really great to meet him, and he shook my hand, and we had a little bit of a conversation, and he was really listening to what I was saying, and he kind of had some response, and I was talking about the fact that I love Boba Fett since I was a child, which I just said, but I also told him that I'd drawn Boba Fett many times over the years for people as gifts. And I was telling him about how my brother, still to this day, I mean, I guess my brother still has it up, and I don't know if he has it up in his apartment right now, but for the longest time, I drew this thing, and it was Captain America versus Boba Fett, which is kind of funny when you think about it. When I drew that was back in the 90s. Back when there was no way in the world that Captain America and Boba Fett would ever be owned by the same company, let alone the possibility, right, that the two of them could be in a movie. This is long before Patton Oswalt had his Marvel Star Wars crossover thing on Parks and Rec. None of that stuff had ever happened. I just drew it because I thought it'd be kind of fun. And I like the idea. One of the things I drew was the reflection of Captain America's shield and Boba Fett's helmet. And I just love, in the visor part. And I just love that kind of idea. And so I was telling him all this silly, stupid stuff like that. And he was listening very intently. And then he kind of responded to that. He's like, yeah, that'd be really cool if Boba Fett and Captain America crossed over in a movie. That'd be really cool. And it was just kind of fun just having this kind of conversation, with the Boba Fett, right?
Right.
And he signed a picture for me. It hangs here in the studio in a place of honor. It's and ready for this. It's up there with Ray Park. Ray Park was also a really great, gracious, fun person to talk to. Again, someone who was there for the fans. Same thing. He wasn't behind the table. He was out in front of the table. He was talking to people. And that's the thing that was really great about Jeremy Bulloch. I'll never forget how he was there for the fans. And it's great to take this moment and talk about how great he was to the fans, to talk about the legacy of Boba Fett. I mean, we wouldn't be talking about Boba Fett all these many years later if he hadn't been able to infuse that character with so much mystique and so much presence. I mean, behind a helmet where you can't even see his face. I mean, he infused that character with so much presence, and so much sort of, you bought that idea that he was the most feared, bounty hunter in the galaxy. I mean, it was amazing how he, helped to build this legend. It's just fun to be able to celebrate the legacy of what, Jeremy Bulloch was able to do. It's very sad to hear about his passing, but it's also fun to celebrate this amazing character that, he brought to life.
It's also kind of interesting to mention that unlike David Prowse, who never really got to have a moment without the mask on, Lucas did give Jeremy Bulloch a moment without the mask, because he's actually plays, an Imperial officer in Empire Strikes Back as well. And many people actually pointed that out in his passing. So that's kind of a neat thing too. So at least he did get that, Again, I do lament the fact that he never got to appear in The Mandalorian. I feel like it was a no-brainer. And again, I would like to think that the only reason it didn't happen is maybe because of his health.
Yeah. Okay. Since we're at 2 hours, do we want to go ahead and move over into Streaming Wars?
Actually, yes. I wanted to do something really quick. This is breaking news. This is something that's happening right now. And I just wanted to talk about it very briefly because this is an evolving story. And actually, Dave, you're the one who told me about it. I didn't actually. This was totally going over my head, and it reminds me a lot of the COPPA situation and everything like that. And because it's an evolving story, there's not a whole lot to talk about at this moment. But I did want to kind of bring the red alert for everybody. Again, this is breaking news. We don't talk about politics a lot on this show, but we do have to talk about politics when it comes to changing with copyright law, trademark law, and intellectual property. Because guess what? Dave and I, we're all in the middle of that. We're in the middle of that because we do this show. We're in the middle of that because we do things like red skirts, routine, staycation. We are involved in actually making stuff. You know what I mean? So we have to be very careful, and we have to kind of, keep our eyes out about this stuff. And what's really interesting is, a lot of people are not talking about this aspect of the COVID relief package. So this is an article from Game Rant, and it says how the U.S. stimulus bill's new illegal streaming measures impact Twitch. Okay, so there's a lot of concern about something called DMCA. Okay, so if you can just remember that, DMCA, right? There's a lot of concern about the implications of this rider that they're putting on the stimulus bill, the one that currently has passed Congress, and basically Trump is saying he's going to veto. Everybody's talking about the $600, right? Everybody's talking about the $600, and now the president's saying no, it should be $2,000, and now they're going back and forth. Okay. The other controversy I've heard is like, well, there's money going to foreign aid, and there's money going to this and going to that. Hey, at least that's spending, right? I mean, if you know anything, Civics 101, all spending bills are supposed to start in the House. You know what I mean? They are the ones that are supposed to initiate spending. What the living hell does trademarks, copyrights, you know what I mean? Stuff like that have to do with any of this, okay? And almost nobody is talking about this because they're talking so much about the stimulus check and how big the stimulus check, and they're talking about aid to Pakistan, and they're talking about all this other stuff. This stuff is going completely under the radar. And the fact of the matter is, much like the COPPA situation, and also because this bill is immense, okay? This bill is like, I think, over 5,000 pages. Nobody seems to know what the hell this actually means. There are people saying that memes might become illegal, that basically you could be charged with a felony crime for sharing a meme. So I just kind of want to put the red alert out there. Dave, you were the one that actually first introduced me to this because it was totally getting past me as well. And then I was doing all this research. I do think this Game Rant article is really good. It does explain some of the intricacies of these different aspects. Like one of the things going on also is like they're trying to set up this copyright court. And I almost call it like a copyright kangaroo court because it's not a real court. It's basically like bureaucrats in the copyright office that are going to start their own sort of like small claims court for copyrights. And some people say it's great for individual creators, actually small creators like yourself and me. But other people are saying, no, it's not. This is going to be like a kangaroo court, and all this is going to do is help big corporations smash little guys. So there's a lot of stuff going on in this bill, again, regarding intellectual property rights that people need to take a look at.
Yeah, it kind of came to my attention because it's kind of funny because like in our mysteries episode, I put on there, co-produced or producer, and I put all these credits in there. And I don't think a lot of people realize that, besides the fact that we're here on the show, Eric and I do produce the Retro Rogues Live show, and there's a lot of issues that sometimes go into this. Like, for example, actually prior to this episode, I had been reaching out to Disney to try and get some additional clearances for us to show some specific images. And of course, they never got back to me like they never do. But anyhow, the point is that we are mindful about these things that are going on and trying to pay attention and make sure that, number one, we are compliant with the law, right? Because we don't want to break the law, right? I don't think anyone wants to go to prison because we talked about Baby Yoda, right? So, it's a weird thing because based off of the wording that exists in this rider that's basically been attached.
Ironically, Dave, I have to call you out on that. We wouldn't get in trouble for calling him Baby Yoda because Baby Yoda is not really a copyrighted term. Yoda might be, but Baby Yoda isn't because that's not his official name. Actually, we'd get in trouble for you calling him Grogu all the time because that is copyrighted.
Right.
See?
So
don't call him Grogu. Right. Call him Baby Yoda.
and this gets right into the kind of the meat of this whole thing, because all they have to do is if someone's taken to court, and if they determine if one or two terms has a broader scope than what is immediately, quote unquote, considered to be the interpretation, because that's what the courts do. The courts interpret law based off something that someone has done. And then if you get enough people and enough courts basically agree to this over time, that's a precedent. And then it's kind of an understood, well, you can't do that because you'll go to jail. But that's how that all comes about, right? So all it's going to take is a couple of judgments that says, well, this term, this clause actually means this, not just this. And if enough courts uphold that, then all of a sudden, people who do things like this, I mean, this is a fan-based show, right. We don't have the kind of numbers, Eric and I aren't making money off of this show. We do it, number one, because we like it, right? We enjoy talking about this with members of the Rogues Gallery. It's fun for us, do we have projects we promote on here from time to time? Yes, but primarily the point of this show is to interact with those of you, the members of the Rogues Gallery, hopefully people that are watching on Twitch and YouTube and whatever. But it's kind of terrifying when you wake up one morning and you start reading this stuff and you're like, I could go to prison because we showed a picture of Boba Fett and I said it was awesome. Like that's kind of scary, and it's weird. It's weird how this kind of comes about. So it's important that, members of our show, people that are watching, be aware of what's going on. Pay attention to the things your politicians are doing. It's like, do we need this stimulus bill to go through? Probably. Are there people out there who need help? Yeah, of course they do.
It has, but again, exactly. Hollywood Jackson, he had this comment. That's what sneaky politicians do. They always put pork into these bills. And listen, the bottom line is this. We should not be debating COVID relief in the same breath that we're debating intellectual property right laws. Okay. That's the problem here. You know what I mean? And that's what they do. They sneak this stuff in and then you don't know what's going on. Now, one of the things I also want to say is this article and a lot of the other research I've done has said that the people that are probably most at risk are the people that do streaming of video games. That's where they're thinking they might actually have the most problems. And I don't do a lot of that. I do that occasionally on my Twitch channel. Occasionally I will do some gameplay footage on there, but I don't do it a lot. So in reality, this may not affect me really at all, or Dave at all. But you know what? You let them fall, guess who they're going to come after next? They're going to come after you. You know what I mean? So just remember that. You may think, well, this doesn't affect me. I don't stream, gaming stuff, so it's not going to affect me. Yeah, this is just the beginning. You let that domino fall, and you're not going to be too far behind it.
And, it goes back to the COPPA thing, because with the COPPA thing, that was the same deal. We had the head, I think it was it the, I forget who it was, Federal Communications Ministry. It was,
I feel like it was the FTC, not the FCC.
FTC,
like it was
that's what it was.
I think.
But the head of that department basically said, "Oh, we're going to go after the YouTube people because we know where they all are." I mean, he like there was a press conference and he straight up said, "We're going to go get these guys because we know exactly where they are. We're just going to get them, right?" And that's the thing. That's the thing. It's just like, are you kidding me?
Yep.
A lot of people don't realize that prior to doing Retro Rogues Live, the other show I used to do, the In the Studio Retro Retrospective show. I mean, I had a channel on YouTube. I mean, a couple hundred subscribers. It wasn't that many. But the whole COPPA thing made me so concerned because I couldn't figure out, am I okay? Am I in violation? I don't know. No. And that was the thing. Even YouTube was telling the creators on there, they're like, we don't know what this means for you. You need to go get a lawyer. That's what they were telling us.
They actually said, go talk to a lawyer. Yeah.
I'm like, are you kidding me? You need to go get a lawyer? It's like I'm doing tutorials for how to draw comic book characters, and we're talking about, 30 and 40-year-old movies and how much we love them, and I need to go get a lawyer? So guess what? I deleted my YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And see, that's the thing. It's like this stuff has far-reaching implications, and it's just kind of weird because it's the same thing. It's kind of dubious wording. Well, and the guy who's authoring this says, well, it means this. It's like, yeah, it means that until someone else finds a different way to apply it. All of a sudden now it means something else. And now
on the face of it, what they're trying to do is they're trying to go after the pirate sites that basically stream free television. Like, I know lots of people that do that. They go to these illegal sites that basically stream everything. So you can see The Mandalorian for free without paying Disney Plus. That's what, on the face of it, that's what this change of DMCA is, because DMCA already exists. This is like an amendment to it. In fact, that's actually, again, with Twitch, that was the recent Twitch purge that happened where people were getting hit with all these. It was the music, which we talk about that all the time. That's why we don't do music on this show, basically, because that gets you flagged more than anything. And there was it was a DMCA notification that tons of people on Twitch got because they're sitting there playing their games, and the games have music, right? And they got hit on the music with these DMCA notices. What this new amendment to DMCA is all about, supposedly, is basically to go after not those people, but to go after, again, all these different sites that stream free TV for stuff that you're supposed to be paying for, whether it's Disney Plus, Netflix, whatever it is. And there's lots of sites that do them. A lot of you might use them. You know what I mean? I know people who do. By the way, I don't, but I know people who do. And so the problem is exactly what you're saying, is they start down that road and they say, well, this is what this is for. And everybody's like, okay, well, that makes sense. Let's just do, but then you don't understand what the other implications are of it. And then also, like you said, the issue of how does a court interpret it? Like, once a court kind of gets it, and then they decide, well, you know what? I think it actually means this, and it applies to this as well. And yeah, you could make a case for that. And you know what? We're going to establish a precedence where you can. So it's a slippery slope. That's the bottom line. It's a slippery slope, and people just need to be awake and looking at this stuff.
And to add insult to injury, I'll use my one thing that goes on with this instead of my two things I could have to go along with this. But to add insult to injury, I used to be co-owner in a small comic book publishing company called Pencil Neck Studios. Bushy Tales, which I think I've talked about here on the show before. Bushy Tales, which was about 4 female samurai who are sent on a quest by Hachiman, the Japanese god of war. The Bushy Tales series, when we were publishing it, was being pirated like crazy. And when I started reaching out, and I remember I actually had a conversation with one of our state senators and via email. And I was like, look, what can be done about this, right? Because I own the rights to this. I'm trying to run a business. Now, Bushy Tales was different. It wasn't crowdfunded. It was going into comic book stores. Like, it was a nationwide release. We had to work really hard. It cost a lot of money to get us to that point. And we were finally kind of in the big leagues, and we had the books in stores, and it was costing us sales. And when I reached out to different people trying to see what could be done, I remember I had a politician actually tell me, well, how are we supposed to police that? And I'm like,
this is their answer. Now they're answering you, Dave. This is their answer. So be careful what you wish for. So, because this is their answer. You're not the only person that has been saying that. And this on the face of it, that's what this is. This is an attempt to sort of try to police that. You know what I mean? But
you notice they're only throwing their hat in the ring now that all the big corporations have the streaming services. Now all of a sudden they care.
Of course.
Now is the time to care. When the independent creators are having a problem, and what do you expect us to do? How are we supposed to police that? But now that the big players are here, we got to do something about this now.
And Hollywood Jackson does mention that you can use his music So Hollywood Jackson, I'm not familiar with your music myself, but I actually there's a friend that I have. He does a podcast, or he does it's a podcast or show, whatever. It's called Heine House. Jason Heine, and he's actually been doing a project where he's trying to do all sorts of music. He's a DJ, and he's been doing all this music that he's going to be releasing for content creators that they can use on their shows. I'm actually looking forward to it, to see how that whole project comes about and how that works, because I think that's really awesome of him to do. But Hollywood Jackson, I'm not familiar with your music personally, but I would love to check it out sometime. So if you got a link or anything like that, just let us know, because we're more than happy to promote that. And Hollywood Jackson also mentions, hey, they just want to get paid. You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, we all just want to get paid. That's true.
And as I've said on the show previously, I don't encourage people to pirate things.
Like I don't pirate anything. I can say that.
I don't either.
I'm not saying I've never pirated anything. In the early days, I certainly did. When the internet was the Wild West, and sometimes I didn't even necessarily know what it was that I was looking at. I didn't realize it was pirated. But I don't pirate things, because I've been into creating content since 1999. I've been creating content since then, and I don't want people to rip me off. So what kind of a hypocrite would I be if I'm pirating stuff when I'm trying to sell stuff? You know what I mean? That doesn't work. And I don't understand creators that are like that. I'm just going to be honest. And maybe you are. I don't know. But I'm just saying, I don't understand that, because if you want people to pay for your content, but you're going to steal somebody else's intellectual property, I don't know what to tell you.
Well, see, and that's the thing. It's like the other thing that basically destroyed the Star Gods deal way back in the day. Stargates was my first creator on the series that I did with Scott Clark and Dean Zachary, and that was about the gods of mythology who have returned into a modern context and reawoken some Earthbound heroes who have forgotten who they were. There's a log, same gods, new millennium, I think was the tagline. It's been a few years since I've really tried to summarize it. But the thing with Star Gods, the thing that killed that deal is because someone was illegally publishing books. So, I mean, I've literally been watching my content being stolen out from under me, and been trying to find a way to secure it since 1996. So it's like I understand that, and because of that concept, I don't pirate things willy-nilly either, and I'm very respectful of that. And I always tell people, it's like, if you like that, go pay for it. Like I don't, it kills me. It just kills me that when the independent creators are having a hard time and they need some help, the politicians don't do nothing. And the instant that the big companies get involved, all of a sudden they care. And it's just like, whatever, man.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Anyway, there's that link from Hollywood Jackson, https emaster.com/profile/Hollywood Jackson. There we go. So Hollywood Jackson, we're more than happy to promote other people's stuff on this show. So keep that in mind, everybody out there in the Rogues Gallery.
And my mom does mention that Bushy Tales had its own soundtrack, and it did. It did have its own soundtrack. Had 14 tracks composed by Joel Gamble. We were one of the first that our comic book actually had its own soundtrack. So if you wanted, while you were reading the comic book, you could actually listen to the soundtrack. And that was something we were very proud of back in the day. So
very cool.
Now I'm trying to think on my end. I'm trying to remember because I closed my email down. I can't remember my second story.
Keep in mind, Dave, we're getting almost 20 minutes over here.
That's what I was about to say. Do we want to do another Streaming Wars story, or do we want to call this good?
I think we should wrap it up. We're trying to keep our show at 2 hours, and we need to stick to it. So
okay, all right. Well, there you go.
We're already over. So
unfortunately, that's going to be it for tonight. We did have a few other topics to cover. Maybe we'll cover them next week unless something more important breaks. But that DMCA, I think it's Digital Millennial Copyright Act or something like that. It was important to bring that up. It's just something that people need to be aware of,
And I appreciate the fact that you brought it to my attention, because I think it's really something that was important for us to address. And we're going to have to continue to address in the future, because right now we don't even know what the status of that bill is. It's kind of up in the air. So.
All right, so we're just going to go ahead and go right into the outro. So I want to thank you for hopefully watching or listening to this episode of Retro Rogues Live. Again, my name is Dave Beatty, and I have been one of your hosts, and I have also been your Dark Lord of the Sith. But I want to thank you for watching the show, and hopefully you had some fun, you found it informative, whatever. And, please tell people about the Retro Rogues Live. Please share the show around, make people aware of it if you would. We greatly appreciate it. Also, too, if you want to see some of my artwork, if you want to see some of the other things that I do, you can check out KirbyTees.com. That's KIRBYTS.com. Over there at KirbyTees.com, you could maybe even consider purchasing a Retro Rogues Live shirt and support what we're doing here on the show. I want to thank my co-host, Mr. Eric Alexander, for being back and providing his very different opinion from mine. I quite love that episode of The Mandalorian. I feel like Eric was a little cold on it, but I understand his argument for it. He makes a lot of valid points. Eric, please tell the folks hopefully watching or listening at home where they can learn more about you on the interwebs.
I'm most active on Twitter. That's at BaseGod14, at BASSGOD14. So that's at BaseGod14 on Twitter. My DMs are open. I'm always open to suggestions. That's also the official YouTube. That's also the official Twitter. That's also the official, Twitch. So if you comment on YouTube or you comment on the Twitch channel, more likely than not, it's going to be me that's responding to you. So anyway, I just want to say that, James Stone says that's a great filler impression, Dave. So, and then also I wanted to go back to an earlier comment that James made, which was, he said, I thought Guardians would be the one false step. Like, was this movie for me, Dave Beatty, and 6 other people? And here we are. And so with that, we will leave James with the last word.